Hello, everybody. Take two.
Hi,
How's it going?
good.
Good. Are you guys ready for a scintillating conversation this evening?
Yes.
Is that subtext? Okay. Let's give this another moment or two and then we will forge ahead. Got a lot to cover tonight. So I just want to put it out there. Does anybody have any issues they're dealing with the course or with any of the assignments or pages opening or anything like that? I'm not looking at the thumbnails right now. So if there's a problem, go ahead and speak up because I don't see you at the moment. There he is. Okay. No? Okay. All righty. Well, good. Well, let's forge ahead then. This is week 13. And so next week, share your screen, Mike. Here we go. Let's do that. Next week, you guys have spring break. So we are going to do, oh, look what I've done. I have gone and not given you folks the week 13. Let's do that real quick. Let me go over here and share from my section 1 class. Apologize about that, folks. Let's do this. Go ahead and very quickly copy this to you folks. So it will appear in your modules here. So you should have lighting fundamentals already. And now you should also have, not quite copied over yet, perhaps. Well, let me try that one more time. Copy started successfully. Okay. Let's do it again. Copy to section 3, spring 2021. See, this is what I'm talking about here. Okay, here is, okay, it finally showed up and there's stuff missing. So with the exception of the assignment, the rest of the week 13 material should be visible to you now. Okay, so we're going to cover composition and shot design this evening. And then your lecture I will load up sometime after class lets out. There's a couple of videos for you to check out and a couple of PDFs to look at and a small amount of reading. Okay, then you folks will have next week off and then we'll meet back here. Now I took the temperature of my section 1 class yesterday afternoon, and what I asked them was if and in your case, it's particularly true. The last day of classes technically on the UCF schedule is Monday, the 26th. And of course, your class would normally be scheduled for the 27th. And sometime after that, 28th or 29th, I think the 29th is when I intended on opening up your final exam. So what I'm posing to you folks is, should we have a study day for the one remaining week of class after um, spring break? And then I will offer another one on Tuesday, the 27th, for those who care to attend. And that will give us ample time to cover all of the topics prior to the midterm and then after the midterm in review for the final test. If that is something that you're all in favor of, let me know, because I'm kind of thinking that the week you guys come back from spring break is probably not the time to open up a new discussion on a new topic. I'm thinking that I can end this semester on an up note with composition and shot design. And then I was going to give you an introduction to camera movement, but not follow through on that until cinematography 2, so that those who want cinematography 2 will cover that topic fully in that session, and the folks that are not only taking this class for the core required elective and may not be interested in camera movement beyond handheld, which is pretty self-explanatory, then those folks would be off the hook. So I'm thinking that our time might be more productively spent with a review session the week after spring break. Is there anybody who disagrees with that course of action?
No.
Okay. Now the caveat is the fall session, such that it is currently scheduled for cinematography 2, is currently closed. It already closed up. So that means if you haven't already signed up and you wanted cinematography 2 for this fall, that is probably not going to happen. Unless for some reason they decide finally to open up a second section of cinematography 2 to accommodate the waiting list.
That's a
Yes?
that's a BFA class, right?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, you could take it as a BA student. It's just a question of being able to get access to the class before the registrations close, before the seating fills up. And it's only a 24 seat class. So it tends to fill up, very, very quickly. And
Yeah,
therefore,
I think I'm gonna take that in the spring next year.
cinematography 2 has typically not been offered in the spring. It's usually a fall only course. I don't know why. I have asked the question and I have never gotten a satisfactory answer. I've also never got a satisfactory answer as to why they don't simply open up, more sections of cinematography 2 when the waiting list seems to be a chronic issue with that particular class. And I haven't received a satisfactory answer on that front either. So until I do, and or until they ultimately realize that the waiting list typically, can adequately supply students to a second section of cinematography 2, if you haven't already signed up for it, you probably won't get it this fall. That's just how that cookie crumbles. So, unfortunately, I am working on that. I am applying the pressures where I feel it will do the most good, and we'll see what happens. So, we will then, given the feedback and lack of protests at this point, we'll make the week that you guys come back, in other words, the week after next, will be a study period for this class. Okay, let's move on to the presentation. Any questions about that? Any confusion about that particular item? Okay. All right, let's do it. Let's talk about composition and shot design. I've covered this for you already, so that's done. and we'll move on here to composition and framing as part one of the discussion. I want to cover with you in today's discussion what makes our videos cinematic, and this is an ongoing question. So we keep adding to the answer to this conundrum from all the way back to week one, basically. We're going to add more complexity to that answer. Repetition and pattern, I want to talk to you about convergence and horizontal relationships, the rule of thirds, and I want to describe some basic shot types to you, up to but not including my discussions on coverage. Coverage I reserve for cinematography 2, because that is for the career-minded who are interested in cinematography as a discipline beyond your college study, and coverage is an important part of how we design shots and select framing and shoot for an edit. So that involves some knowledge of directing and editing, as well as advanced topics in composition and framing. So it's a cinematography 2 question. But I do want to give you some basics, some guidelines, some guiding principles as far as framing is concerned. Talk to you about the types of framing that is appropriate or inappropriate in terms of the traditional criteria for establishing cinematic imagery versus mere snapshots. And we'll talk a little bit about proximity, foreground, middle ground, and background specifically. Okay, let me lead off with a quick discussion from Michael Chapman. Michael Chapman is a cinematographer. He recently died. I believe it was last year that we lost him in the early summer. He was a longtime collaborator of Martin Scorsese, and he had some very keen observations about the cinematic image as it relates to story. So let's see what Mr. Chapman has to say here. This is from Cook Optics TV, and it's about, I don't know, three and a half minutes.
I always say that cinematography doesn't have to be beautiful, it has to be appropriate to what your eye is seeing. And I don't know whether I used this example yesterday, but the most obvious example is, suppose you're telling a story and you focus on a man's face and he's looking past the camera, and his face is just radiant with emotion and love and sexiness and everything, and you cut around to what he's looking at, and what he's looking at is a beautiful woman lying on a bed, whether nude or not nude, doesn't matter. Now, there, the image should be beautiful. The lighting should be soft and lovely and coming in from the window through the soft draperies, and she should look gorgeous, and the whole thing should look beautiful. That's the point, is her beauty and his love, and it should be beautiful. And then cut to 6 months later, they're having a furious argument in the back of a taxi. And she's saying, "You son of a bitch, you burn," and he's going to hit her and slug her. Now, should that be beautiful? Of course not. It would be counterproductive. It would be absolutely against what the scene is trying to say. So the cinematography has to be at the service of the story and of the imagery, not just self-consciously itself. Visual storytelling is all around us now, much more than it ever was. I mean, your cell phone and hundreds of channels on, not just the main channels, but all sorts of it. There's visual imagery and storytelling of all kinds everywhere, all around us, surrounding us. So nobody can escape the idea that there's such a thing as visual storytelling and that everybody does it. I mean, everybody does do it, so that they are far more conscious, I would assume, that young people vaguely interested in anything like that are infinitely more conscious of the possibilities and the existence of this world. If you grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, you had in my day, you had no idea that there was this world of visual storytelling, of movies that was done by people. Didn't seem real at all. But now it does, and anybody anywhere can make a movie on a cell phone. And in fact, the most vivid images I think that we see now are things that non-professional people have taken on their cell phones of atrocities and bombings and God knows what, and hurricanes and earthquakes and things. You know, those are the images which you can't turn away from. And they're not shot by professional cinematographers, they're shot by your grandmother, you know, but the imagery is there and it's very powerful. So anybody growing up and thinking of a career in the movies knows that career exists, and that, as I say, that looking and recording what you see exists all around you.
Okay. So I'm playing that for you. Why? Well, I'd like you to start thinking about images with a higher degree of complexity than simply what was in your field of view at the time you pointed your taking lens at the image in front of the camera, okay, or the scene in front of the camera. This whole discussion, this whole semester, hopefully has become abundantly clear to you. It's about variables. It's about traditional expectation, audience expectation of cinematic elements. It's about control and manipulating the variables associated with the techniques you're using or the mode you're working in. It's about working from a variety of best practices, including mode and technique, so that you can apply principles and you can apply skills that you've learned or arrived at, developed on your own, to create compelling images that share in the burden of telling the story denoted by the script, so that it's not only the script and the words of dialogue contained therein that are informing the audience and entertain the audience by revealing the story. Okay, so music helps with this. Performance certainly helps with this, and the visuals should support and undergird all of those other disciplines in telling the story, in revealing the narrative, expressing the tone, the themes contained in your story, as well as revealing other details and other information that can come through an unspoken communication with the audience. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about 5 elements of composition here this evening, and you can argue that there are more, and there probably are. But I think that the 5 that I want to talk to you are kind of at the bedrock or the foundation of our visual storytelling lexicon. So what are they? Okay. Well, first of all, they're tools. They're not rules as much as they are tools. So you can think of the 5 elements I'm going to introduce to you as ingredients in a process. You know, everybody knows how to bake chocolate chip cookies, but everybody doesn't use the same ingredients, right? Some of you might use chocolate. Some of you might use carob. Some of you might use dark chocolate. Some of you might use white chocolate. Some of you make chocolate chip cookies with hazelnuts in them. Some of you don't. Okay. They're still chocolate chip cookies, no matter who you ask. But they're going to have a different complexity based on who the author of those cookies was. And your cinematography is going to have the same level of complexity and hopefully more than chocolate chip cookies at some point. But so think of these elements or these compositional tenets as tools at your disposal, but not necessities in order to validate your cinematography. And then use them at your discretion. I'm talking about pattern and or repetition, balance or symmetry, texture, lines, and that is to say lines that lead the eye to a horizon or lead the eye to a focal point. And then we will sort of round out our discussion about depth of field as a compositional element as well. Okay. Before I show you a series of images, I want to show you another Cook Optics TV snippet. And this is John DeBoerman, and he is talking about how he thinks of composition and how he employs composition and framing in his cinematography. So let's take a look at Mr. DeBoerman and see how he feels about the topic. Oh gosh, it's doing it again. Please stand by while I adjust the audio on this particular piece of video. How embarrassing. Okay, where is, please and thank you. The volume, yeah, has been turned down. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay.
It's something that I think is absolute pivotal to good cinematography and good films, is the use of the frame. A frame cannot just be a representation of just what's in front of you. It's got to have three-dimensionality. It's got to mean much more than what it's shown. And I think I constantly have to think every time I'm doing a film, so how could I make this image more poetic? How can I say more about the state of, the emotional state of that character in this film? And there's an example in an education, for instance. And it's terribly simple, and people would just say, oh, well, you know, that's obvious. But it's a young girl, Carey Mulligan, who's being driven by this man that she doesn't really know. She's 18, he's 30. She doesn't know who he is particularly, but he's exciting. He's something new. She's come from a very structured background with her parents from the post-war era. And he's driving her in this old Jensen, I think, and the car stops and he gets out of the car and goes across the road and sees this black family across the road. She's observing all this. We could have shot that very conventionally. But what seemed to be more poetic and simple was where really the scene's about her and what she's reflecting on who this person is and what he's doing. And so the next shot is her sitting in her car looking at the scene. And the car window's closed. So it's just a reflection of this black family with him reflected in the glass, but she is just behind it. But you see her clearly enough, and you see that she's thinking about, so you're creating a superimposition in reality, in the real world of what was happening. And then it's just a question of using the focus puller, and I think focus pullers are underestimated in the film game. They can be incredibly important at knowing when to pull focus. Terribly simple, but there's poetry, and it's done in such a simple way. It's not a question of looking in one way, looking back, and looking the other way, and looking back. It's all done in one image. So it's concise, but it works in a very, very gentle way. And I think, you know, it can happen through the choice of locations. It can happen through all sorts of things, but it is absolutely important to find ways of actually creating scenes that imply more than the scene itself. You can over-edit films. And often they are over-edited, I think, where you're telling the audience what you're meant to be thinking about certain things, as opposed to leaving it slightly wider and let the people decide which, are they looking at the reflection in the back, or are they looking at the foreground, or what exactly, what their emotion is and who are they with. I think that's what I'm implying, that, you know, I love doing that. That this is something that was made in Dagenham, but you know, there are lots of films in which I've tried to do that.
Okay. So I think it's important for you to hear from other cinematographers what, you know, how they feel about these topics and what they've done within the context of their own work in exploring these ideas, rendering these ideas, learning things as they go along. It's interesting in John de Boorman's case that because of something we call linguistic relativity, which is people from different cultures might place emphasis or different definitions to terms that we use in our language. The way he arrived at setting up that shot was partly because of the way an Englishman thinks of the term thinking about something. And he said the shot was about the young girl reflecting on her relationship with the older man. And by using the word reflection in place of the word thinking about, he arrived at a compositional opportunity that didn't really present itself in the script. And so it was, you know, his ambition to take advantage of that situation and create a composition visually that was interesting and told the story, but in a visual way that also added texture, metaphorically speaking, to the shot design and to the visual flow of the movie. And I think that's kind of interesting because he does use the term thinking later in his explanation, but it's in a different context. And so I challenge you to, when you're reading a script, use that same sort of out of box thinking and look for opportunities to create visual layers of complexity to the narrative, but still in service to the story, as Michael Chapman emphasizes, right? We don't want to create odd and exotic photography simply to make a generalized point about something. But on the other hand, isn't it interesting when you can find these little nuggets of opportunity and exploit them in a way that's beautiful and compelling and tells the story um, in a very creative way. So if you're going to apply these 5 principles that I'm raising issue with, you may arrive at solutions like these. So here's an example of the Vatican staircase, the Bramante staircase. And it's hinging on the principle of pattern and repetition. Really, you've got the treads that have these sort of leading edges. The toe edges are kind of highlighted, and we have this concentric circle plan that's happening here. And you know, it's leading the eye a little bit like a nautilus shell, right, from the outside in or from the inside out, whatever your impulse happens to be. And so it's taking advantage of a very interesting opportunity. As I explained in my section 1 class last night, this is almost undoubtedly not the original aspect ratio of this shot. This shot was almost certainly shot on 6x6 format. The level of detail present in the image indicates a negative much larger than a standard 35 millimeter negative, which would be 24 by 36 millimeters in dimension. Which also means that the original negative was 6 centimeters by 6 centimeters or a square format, and then this rectangular composition was extracted from it. Okay, so the photographer was undoubtedly working in a square mode, but thinking about a rectangular opportunity he could exploit out of the larger composition. Okay, and that includes certain edges that are running off the paper, right? Certain details that don't fulfill themselves within the context of the frame. They're allowed to run off the frame, but our brain understands what that motion is, that energy of that railing that we see running below the bottom frame, up through the frame, and above the top of the frame. And then we see a bit of it over here continuing on itself. And we get a sense of what this full composition would be, but it's expressed in terms of a much narrower rectangle. If we apply a similar principle here, here is the concept of pattern and repetition expressed through modern cinematography. This is from The Empire Strikes Back. So this is Pete Shishitsky, and he's giving us pattern and lines that are leading us towards a focal point in the distance. All of these rows of LEDs, when they turn on, we start from a dark tunnel. Luke emerges at one end, hits a button, all the lights turn on, then he gets into this tunnel and walks forward towards camera and exits frame right. So it's a very interesting composition that was chosen here, this opportunity in this little set piece. And it's speaking on the level of lines that converge towards either a horizon or a central focal point. In this particular piece, we have that principle working, and we have the principle of balance and symmetry working. In this shot, it's an asymmetrical composition, meaning it's out of balance. The left of frame and the right of frame are different in terms of their detail, lighting, everything, number of elements, proximity, and so forth. In this shot, however, the jetty is running straight out from the center of the bottom frame, and it's heading towards the horizon in a series of converging lines or leading lines that are taking us right to a central point on the horizon, right where my cursor is, right? The only asymmetrical element really is this light post here. Everything else is kind of falling within, the basic constraints of symmetry. The clouds are arguably different on either side, but for the most part, I think the prevailing feeling here is symmetry, is balance. Here is the same principle applied to The Shining. So Danny's riding around the hotel.
Are you cooking two meals?
No, chicken.
Pardon?
And then the lamb chops. No, I'll cut up my meals.
Okay.
The lamb chops.
Oh, watch the open mic, folks. We're hearing the dinner menu.
Sorry.
That's okay. So here is the converging lines principle working here. Danny has been driving around the hotel on his big wheel. Steadicam is following him, tracking with him, sometimes leading him. And in this particular sequence, the Steadicam comes around on Danny Don Juan. Danny takes the corner and turns down this hallway. And when that happens, we're over Danny in his POV. So it's an external POV. And we see what he sees down the end of the hallway, the two ghost girls from I think it's room 107 or something. And so it's as though the director, the filmmaker is telling us, look right here. This is what I want you to think about. The hotel is really haunted, and here is a physical manifestation of something that Danny has been losing sleep over and thinking that he sees all over the place, and his parents don't believe him. In this pair of photographs, we have Banyan Roots by Brett Weston, the son of this photographer who did Cabbage Leaf in a series, Edward Weston. fairly famous black and white photographer from the turn of the last century, more or less. And then his son following in his footsteps 50 years later. The expression here that I think is the prevailing compositional element is texture. And he's using lighting in a way that reveals the texture of the subject that he's chosen. So there was something about the cabbage that stimulated this photographer to create visually a series of photographs using the right sort of lighting and contrast to offer compositions that might be oddly reminiscent of something else that he has seen in nature or in the real world, that he was able to sort of recreate or insinuate through purposeful manipulation of the light on the cabbage leaf. Does it stimulate any thoughts from any of you about what this might be a euphemism for? Or an analogy? Do you see anything in this composition that reminds you of anything?
Kind of like maybe a brain that have a bunch of lobes in it, maybe.
Did you say a brain?
Yeah, like has lobes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Hair could be another thing.
Oh, hair. That's a good one. We haven't had hair yet. Yeah, maybe hair.
Flowing hair. Yeah.
Right. Anything else?
Cabbage leaf looks a lot like a person with a blanket over their head.
Maybe, yeah. Like maybe this is the form of a person under the bed sheet or something. Anyone else?
It reminds me of a fish of some sort. Maybe like a cuttlefish with the edges of the cabbage there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, cool. Okay. Anyone else? I think, and of course I revealed the same feeling last evening. When I look at this, I think of the delicate folds of a dress, of a lady's ball gown, maybe, or maybe even a wedding dress, but a dress certainly, with all of the, frill and detail that goes into, a very finely created garment for a special occasion of an event or like I said, a ball, a dance. And then I thought, where might I find that sort of inspiration in contemporary film? And my immediate thought was the film lit by a friend of mine, incidentally, The Phantom Thread. And so The Phantom Thread is about this man here, Daniel Day-Lewis, is playing, he's playing a tailor, a garment maker, and fashion designer. And his whole life story is about how he fell in love with the garment industry, how he's very inspired by beautiful women, and the visage of of femininity, and his in his fervent expression of his joy, and of course his inspiration is to create these garments for models, for women that he meets, and they're fabulous, and they receive critical acclaim. He's very successful. He lives in I think it's set in it's either England or France, and it's just it's just a very rich tapestry of imagery. And it's all sort of taking advantage of the vivid detail that Paul Thomas Anderson is weaving throughout the context of this story. I chose this image. There was some other images I could have chosen, but I chose this image in particular because I want to stress that in order to perceive texture in an image, It depends very much on the angles that we assume for our lighting. So if from the position of the camera, which is clearly, behind this woman, she's facing the party, or she's going to be received by a group in the next room. And Daniel Day-Lewis is waiting for her, thinking about her presentation. We're behind her. If we put the lighting, by the lens, we would flatten out all the detail in this scene, in her dress, in the molding on the walls, and the inlay in the doors. We would lose all of that rich surface texture and relief, so to speak, that we see from lighting that comes from the sides. Okay, and within the frame itself, we have two prop lights that have been set up by a photographer who's there to photograph this woman before and after she presents to the group. And I thought it interesting that the lights are placed in the same positions that the actual cinema lights would have been placed in order to anticipate and exploit the texture opportunity that's here. You can see that the girl has a key. She has a highlight on the right side of her face, and it's clearly coming from the same direction as this source right here. And then there's a chandelier visible in frame, and if there's a chandelier in this room, there's probably a chandelier in this parlor as well. And it appears that there's some warmth that's kind of hitting her on the top of the head and on her low side shoulder, coming from directly above. It's a different color temperature. And so it indicates there's probably a chandelier above her head. And then there's a fill light over here to sort of even out and fill in the shadows on her low side, created by a window and a light source coming from this direction. So it's interesting that, the art is imitating life, or the other way around, maybe, that the prop lights in the scene are doing the same thing that the cinema lights outside of the frame are also doing. Here's the concept of the metaphorical horizon, right? The horizon representing our future, or our success, or our life, and the leading lines that draw us forward into that unknown, into that as yet unforeseen or unexperienced future. And it's a pretty composition. It's clearly polarized. It's black and white, but it's been polarized, or it has been filtered through contrasting filters that bring out the dark blue skies as black values, and then add contrast to the highlights in the clouds. It's a very deliberately constructed frame. It's got asymmetry going on in terms of the road being coming out of frame right, and the sea or the ocean represented in frame left, which has psychological connotations, right? We have a big sky component. We have the horizon, which is almost running perfectly through the center of the frame. It's a little bit below the horizontal center of the frame. And so our life is forging ahead on the highway of life coming out of frame right. We have the placid, deep, unexplored regions of our life that we have not yet experienced, that are all lying ahead in wait for us here in the horizon, right? So it's a very hopeful image, I think. You may see it in a different light. You may see this as a disturbing image. If you do, I would be interested in hearing that opinion. But for the most part, I think it's generally received as a hopeful image in this respect, for all of those themes that I mentioned. You can apply some of that, and then of course, if you are interested in the themes of leading lines, not so much in the metaphor of the sea representing the unknown portion of our life, but certainly the converging lines and the idea of a horizon, you may apply those principles like Wally Pfister to The Dark Knight and give us an image like this, where we have leading lines caused by the rows of buildings on either side of the street, And at the point where all these lines are converging on a very low horizon, we have the antagonist of our film, the Joker, standing in the middle of the road, waiting to receive our hero in a final confrontation. Okay, so this is a different kind of negative connotation for this same theme used in reverse, pointing to the problem that must be addressed. You notice how the problem exists in the foreground and our hope and dreams exists in the background of this image, right? The future, our hopes, our dreams, our destiny are here, deep in the background, on the horizon, just over the horizon, perhaps, is the metaphor, I think. And in this case, we have a problem that must be addressed. And because the lines are leading to a focal point on the horizon, but it's blocked by the Joker, it's telling us if we want to reach our dreams and our full potential, we have to deal with our present and not worry about our future. Can you see that? Can you see that analysis being true about this image? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why?
I disagree with it being the hopes and dreams. I see it more of as like more like the true mission, because really to me the main antagonist, there are two main antagonists. There was Two-Face and Joker, because I remember this, and I think that this is in this one. I still haven't seen the Joker yet, but I think that this is like in order to save Harvey, Batman has to defeat the Joker, because technically the Joker caused Two-Face to fall.
Okay, so that's a hope. You know, maybe not a dream in the normal context of dream, but it certainly is. If Batman needs to complete his mission, reach his objective, save Harvey, he has to deal with this first.
Yeah, the guy who created him in the first place.
All those other objectives exist after he deals with this, somewhere in the future down the road. Right?
Maybe it's just a cool shot.
or it's just a cool shot.
Maybe.
No, I mean I like your explanation a lot.
Yeah.
I really did.
I saw that too. Yeah, I just saw that. I just saw there's like what that was like beyond was the part I disagreed with, but I could see that the present problem was Heath Ledger's Joker.
Yeah, good. So, and you know, I'm telling you something. I mean, as a gaffer working in Hollywood for a very long time, believe me when I tell you, I have worked for the DP who said, it's just a cool shot. I want to do it because I think it's a cool shot. And really not read much further into it than that. Okay. So there are those who function on that level of creativity or on that level of ambition for their images. And I'm not necessarily going to tell you that that's wrong, but I think that it adds an added dimension to your own work, your own creative body of work, if you can cast a very wide net for a variety of audiences, all with the same set of images. So for those who are going to the theater just to see Batman beat up on Heath Ledger as the Joker, great, or the Riddler or whatever he is in this movie.
Joker.
Thank you. And there's some folks that are like, oh, I just, you know, Heath Ledger's just dreamy, so I'm going to see the character. Okay, you know, or I'm really interested in the way Wally Pfister photographs movies. I think that it's interesting the techniques that he uses. Why would, for instance, he choose to mix 35 millimeter 3-perf with 65 millimeter and IMAX film in the same movie? What's the purpose of that if the images are just cool, right? He must be saying something else by employing those techniques. And so those are little Easter eggs that he's leaving behind for the people that are willing to do a little digging, metaphorically speaking, into his work to find out what his inspirations are, his impulses, and what maybe his message was, thematically through the visuals. Takes all kinds, to have a film industry. So, you're hopefully going to experience both types and work for both types and take from each what you can glean, and use it yourself and have it contribute to your own style, the evolution of your own style, right? Because even the guy that, told me, I'm just going to do this because I think it looks good, uh, even that individual had, things to offer intellectually about cinematography. And maybe maybe one of the best lessons was sometimes I just want it to be pretty, you know. Sometimes I don't really want to think hard about it. I just want it to be an image that makes you go, hmm. So, okay. Depth of field, as we have been discussing for the last couple of weeks, is a really great way to create a focal point. Now, there's no leading lines here, but there is some pattern going on in the background. They are clearly other Hershey's Kisses, but it's not critical to this composition to see these other Hershey Kisses in detail. We want to think of these other Hershey's Kisses in a more impressionistic way, in a Monet impressionist kind of way, right? They're there, it's clear what they are, but they're dreamy, right? This is the dream of how good this little piece of chocolate tastes. So the one star of the show is front and center, right? And his colleagues are in the background, enforcing the idea, but not encroaching on the moment, which is, when I get you unwrapped and pop you in my mouth, the joy that I'm going to feel. And it's an ad for a product. And so the whole objective of this kind of manipulation of tone and technique is to entice you to go out and buy a bag of Hershey's Kisses. And maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe you don't like chocolate. Maybe you're allergic to it. And in that case, you would be excluded from the fantasy. But this is for any person who enjoys chocolate and who has ever had a Hershey's Kiss. This is like, you remember how good this tastes, and you haven't had one in a while, have you? And it would be very easy if you just run down to your corner store and grab a bag of Hershey's Kisses, and you too can be enjoying the splendor of this moment with your own little chocolate dollop, right? And that's advertising, folks. And cinematography is critical to advertising. You don't need a Hershey's Kiss. You may not even be thinking about or craving a Hershey's Kiss in the moment you're flipping through this magazine. Maybe you're in the doctor's office waiting for an appointment and you see this ad and you go, oh, wow. You know what? As soon as I get out of here, I'm going to stop at the corner store and I'm going to grab a bag of these, take them home with me, It's just designed to get you to adopt a course of action that's been suggested to you through imagery, right? And that's rhetoric. That's the rhetorical call to action, we call it. The author has given you an idea, planted an idea in your head using the ethos of a visual that's very strong. The pathos, you might argue, the passionate inspiration of an image that is translated to you and makes you go out and buy a bag of Hershey's chocolate, right? Depth of field is something that it's part of our stock and trade. Cinematography abhors a vacuum, but it equally abhors a frame full of detail that can be distracting to the eye. So we use depth of field specifically and very deliberately to control exactly how much of the world in our field of view is in focus and available to the audience for analysis, and how much of it has been deemed soft and dreamy and out of focus to suggest that it's not important the audience spend any time with that detail. Look at what's sharp. That's where the message is contained. Does that make sense? Cinematic bokeh is something I asked you to do in your homework assignment. And I got a variety of solutions image-wise, but about half of what I saw really didn't reflect a firm understanding of what bokeh is, what's happening. So bokeh is an aspect of depth of field. It's a byproduct, I think, of depth of field and of the minimal acceptable resolution of a particular pixel or film grain, in the degree to which that grain or pixel site is unresolved or out of focus. Okay. It's most commonly reflected in point sources of light, which means that it's most commonly seen in images that are taken after hours, after daylight hours, either inside or outside. It doesn't necessarily matter. But you see it a lot in night exterior shots like this one here. The lights of the city are sprawling out before this photographer who is in some vantage point that's up high, and taking a picture of the city. There was something maybe in the foreground, a model or an object, a statue or something, an object. And the background was rendered with this beautiful bokeh pattern from all of these point sources that are unresolved, out of focus. Okay. And they are basically the product of a wide open aperture on a lens, and that circle of confusion that I spoke to you about 2.5 weeks ago. It's happening as a result of an f-stop that offers very minimal depth of field. It's happening for point sources that are lying well outside of the zone of focus. And so it is an aspect of depth of field, but it's a specific kind of use of depth of field. Okay. So I got some folks that just gave me images where the background was out of focus. And of course, that's not really giving us the best example or demonstration of bokeh because there's no point source highlights to look at. Okay. I shot a little video at the fountain downtown in Orlando. It's over in Thornton Park. There's water trickling down in the foreground from the fountain, and then the street where, looking towards downtown, there's a lot of street lights out and there's some cars that are approaching. And all I did was just sort of rack focus from minimum focus where the water's coming down to closer to infinity focus somewhere in the deep distance to bring the cars into focus, and then watch how the highlights kind of come in and out of focus. They get big the more they get out of focus, and then smaller and smaller until they resolve into crystal clear point sources. And then as you go the other way from minimum to maximum, you can see that bokeh occurs in two positions on the lens, near minimum focus and near maximum focus, depending on where the point sources are. So if you're at maximum focus and the point sources are in the foreground, they will express bokeh as well. And if you're focused on the foreground, then point sources in the background will express this bokeh pattern, or these bokeh balls, we call them. So take a look at this really quick. So you can start to see the cars. This was actually a test of an anamorphic lens, but it serves both purposes here. So you can see how those little ovular bokeh balls emerge from focusing all the way back to minimum, and then focusing through the water, and then from the water to the cars. And then you see the water come out of focus, the car becomes in focus, and then the car is going to approach and slowly come out of focus again. And then I'm going to help it a little bit. So that was just a little test to see what kind of bokeh this lens would generate, and to see if it was pretty or weird. Some lenses, depending on the shape of the aperture, can create weird misshapen bokeh. Sometimes, depending on the type of elements and the way they've been ground, the circles or the ovals might not be perfectly symmetrical. They may have an asymmetrical feel about them. And I just wanted to see how the bokeh emerged on this lens and what it would look like. And I think it's pretty interesting. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you now about composition specifically. What is it and how are we using it? So composition is simply the arrangement of objects in the frame. the arrangement of relevant objects within the frame might be an even more precise definition, right? Because things that don't support the story ideally shouldn't be included in your framing. So the things that we do see, the things that are visible in the frame, which things are important, and they will have some order to them, either hierarchy or proximity, hierarchy being level of importance from most important to least important, proximity meaning where are they arranged in the frame and what is the spacing amongst these relevant objects, and then anything that is not critical to the story, how is it represented in that frame? Is it cropped out? Is it thrown out of focus? Is it in some way marginalized in favor of other details within the frame that are asking for our attention? Okay, and how you do that is indicative, I think, of your style of shooting. One of the rules or principles that you can apply to arrangement of elements in the frame that will contribute to your compositional choices is what we call the rule of thirds. And I'm sure you've seen that before, but just very simply, the rule of thirds is the notion that if you take your cinematic frame and divide it into 9 equal parts, 3 horizontal compositional zones and 3 vertical compositional zones, where those zones intersect, 4 points of interest are created that are psychologically and instinctively sought after by our visual cortex. So we will look here first if there's any sort of detail to decipher in an image, theoretically speaking, and fairly predictably so. So all you have to do is experiment with the arrangement of objects in the frame to see if it's working for you according to the rule of thirds. For instance, here's a shot from 2001: A Space Odyssey. In this scene, has everyone seen 2001 from this group?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Marcus?
This scene I'm familiar with.
That's DVD.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't let you do that.
This is an important film. This is a film that was created in 1967 for release in 1968, prior to any Apollo landings on the moon, prior to a lot of the space history that we enjoy in this country. And it was very prophetic in the imagery and in the context of the story. In the story, these 2 men are investigating an anomaly that started with the discovery of an object buried on the surface of the moon. It was determined that there were other objects throughout the solar system that were emanating some kind of signal that was indicating where they were. One of them was indicating it was in orbit around the planet Jupiter. And so these guys hop into an exotic space vehicle, take their AI computer with them, HAL, and they jet off towards Jupiter. They have a crew on board of scientists that are going to evaluate, study, and test the object in Jupiter orbit. But somewhere between the launch and the destination at Jupiter, the computer goes off the rails, has a psychotic break, kills the crew that are in cryosleep, and starts presenting these 2 guys with a scenario that suggests Hal is lying about the situation that they're in and what's going on. He starts interfering with systems on the ship. These guys try to repair it, and they start coming to the idea and the conclusion that maybe Hal is messing with them. Maybe Hal has some orders or some conflicting instructions that were given to him without their knowing about it. And it seems like Hal knows their every move. So in an effort to conceal themselves and to try and have a private conversation, Dave Bowman and Frank Poole, the 2 astronauts that remain alive, go into one of the utility pod spacecraft that they keep on board, close all the doors, and try to create an audio tight environment where they can speak amongst themselves without Hal knowing what's going on. And so we have Hal out the window through the porthole here. We can see him slightly out of focus. This is Hal right here, the computer. And then we have our 2 astronauts in the foreground, and they're sharply in focus. So we know that this scene is about their conversation. So they are sharp. It's about Hal. So we see Hal in the background, kind of like listening in but he's out of focus, meaning that he is not where we need to be placing our attention at the moment, right? Until we start seeing some cutaways of Hal from outside the spaceship, that we indicate that Hal is reading their lips because he can see them through the window, right? But here's the composition. Here are the horizontal compositional lines. Here are the vertical compositional lines. And at 2 of the 4 foci, we have interesting elements. So we got Frank Poole on this focus, or pretty much touching it. We got Dave Bowman on this focus. His face is in the right center 1/3. Frank's is in the left center 1/3. They are symmetrically balanced. And in the center is the object of their ire, Hal. He's outside the craft, but he's in the center vertical compositional zone, so that we know he's important to what's happening here. He's central to the idea, but he's not the point of focus at the moment. Okay. Here's a frame from Titanic. Anybody here not seen Titanic? Okay, so in Titanic, we've got Cal and Rose. Cal's the rich Wall Street aristocrat hitching a ride on the Titanic for a luxury cruise back to the United States from England with his newly betrothed Rose well, she's not Dawson at this point in the script, but Rose, who is his bride to be. We have Jack. He is a roustabout American expat that was bumming around London, won a free ticket on the Titanic White Star Lines in a poker game, ends up on the boat ride back to the United States as a matter of chance, ends up meeting Rose, falling in love with Rose. Rose meets him, finds him an intriguing guy. Cal's a bit of an abusive SOB, and he's not high on Rose's list of priorities, except that she's a debutante and looking to marry up to preserve her family name and fortune and create a relationship, a marriage relationship that keeps wealth and aristocracy in the family. But she realizes Cal's not the catch that he was cut out to be, and she really rather prefers the young man who has no money. And so they get together and they start having a romantic affair. Cal gives the heart of the ocean diamond to Rose as a betrothal gift. And it is alleged that and arranged that this thing goes missing. They plant it in Jack's pocket. Jack is outed as the thief of the diamond. He falsely accuses Jack, gets Jack locked up in the security office of the Titanic. And then bang, they hit an iceberg and everybody has to figure out how to escape this problem. Okay. So all of those elements of the story are kind of locked into visual composition here in this particular frame. So here's Rose on the right 1/3 and her face is centered. Here's Cal. He is at the intersection of the vertical and the horizontal compositional elements in frame right. The heart of the ocean diamond that was allegedly stolen is right smack dab in the center of the frame. Right, bullets, we call it, right in the middle of the frame. If this was the crosshair on a target at the range, bullets means right in the middle, right in the 10 ring, right? Here it is, right here. Here's Jack, the accused. He's on the left intersection of the vertical and horizontal lines, right? You could think of these guys as at the 4 corners, the intersection of 2 different worlds, the world of a poor young guy in love and the world of a rich guy who can't buy love no matter how much he spends, right? So we've got these sort of interpretive values happening in this frame. This is the security guy who's offering up the heart of the ocean, having been found in Jack's pocket. And this guy buried in the back, this is David Warner, and he is basically the personal attaché / security guard for Cal, who's a wealthy guy that runs around with a posse. Okay. And so all this stuff is happening. And if you also notice, all of the faces are on the top 1/3 horizontal line, and really nothing is happening in the lower 1/3 horizontal zone of composition. It's all top weighted. he says ironically as he takes a sip of coffee from his Waikiki mug. Anybody else see anything here other than what I've mentioned? Okay.
There's like a rule of thirds going on with the guy behind Rose.
Yeah, Cal.
Cal, yeah. He's kind of in the rule of thirds, and so is Jack a little bit. So you can see kind of they're on opposing sides, maybe. That's telling you something.
They're all in the rule of thirds. This entire grid is the rule of thirds, but what they are at is at a point of intersection between vertical compositional thought and horizontal compositional thought. So it's almost like the teams are split up, right? The bad guys over here, the good guys over here. He's kind of neutral. He's being paid. So he probably wouldn't be with Cal if he wasn't being paid, but he wouldn't be with Leo either because he's an opportunist and Leo is a romantic. So they don't mix. So they're in different sections of the compositional grid. Rose is kind of almost a ping pong ball in the middle at the moment, right? I love you. No, I love you. No, I love you. No, I love you, right? And so she's off to one side. She's in the center of the dispute, and she's at the same level as the heart of the oceans, more or less, right? This was supposed to represent his love for her. Here she is. Here's the heart of the ocean. Oh, here's Leo's heart right here. You think Russell Carpenter thought that deeply about that? I don't know. Maybe. He's a pretty smart guy. Here's another crack at the rule of thirds composition applied to an image. This is from Mad Max Fury Road. Who's this? Tom Hardy in the mask. He was a prisoner in the beginning of the movie by the creatures from the desert. I don't know why he was their prisoner. We don't really know why he was captured, but he seems to be a freewheeling personality that just wants to go his own way. At the first opportunity, when they stop for some reason to take a look around at where they're going, I guess, he seizes a weapon from one of his captors. And so in this scene, he is leveling the gun at the guy that was driving the truck that he was recently tied up and thrown in the back seat of. And he wants to get away. So here he is at the intersection of the right 1/3 vertical and horizontal compositional themes, right? Bang, right there. And it's kind of like right on his mask, which indicated his captivity. And then here's the gun that he seized on the other intersection of vertical and horizontal compositional rules on the left of frame. So he's in the right of frame, the gun's in the left of frame. It's all on the upper horizontal 1/3 line. So I guess you could think of this as a positive insinuation because he might get away. That would be a positive thought, right? And that would be something you might think of if the energy or your enthusiasm were elevated, maybe. And maybe if it was on the lower 1/3, it might indicate a negative or a dive in your energy. It's a theory, but it seems to resonate. Everything is on the top 1/3 because he wants to get away like nobody's business. And it looks like he might just achieve that end because he managed to get his hands on a gun. He's going to shoot that crazy dude that's driving the truck. Okay, so good framing seems to follow the rule of thirds as a law, right? Sometimes we break it. Sometimes because of the movement of elements within a frame, the subjects don't line up until they get to their what we call their number 2 mark, right? Number 1 starts them into the scene at some point doing something and they move to their number 2. So between number 1 and number 2, they might not strictly follow the rule of thirds, but certainly when they get to their number 2 position, they'll probably fall within one of these frames, right? At one of these converging points of vertical and horizontal compositional thought. Here's Jason Bourne. Look at him. His eyes right on the intersection. His gun is on the right 1/3. His face is on the left 1/3. His hands and the gun are all taking up these intersections, and his face is almost taking up both of these intersections. He's clearly balanced in the frame. His intellect and his method of accomplishing his goal are both on the important lines of composition. Over here, we've got To Kill a Mockingbird. So we got Atticus Finch, the lawyer, defending I forget this character's name, gosh. But he's on the right 1/3, representing one concern within the theme of the movie, and he represents another concern within the theme of the movie. They're both on the same team. They're both in the same frame. He's occupying the left side. He's occupying the right side of the same argument, right? And what's this down here? This looks like, what is this? I'm not quite sure what that is down there. Looks like maybe Gosford Park. Everything's again drawn up on the grid of the rule of thirds, and we have, oh, this might be Gatsby, actually, the original. Here is the center of everyone's attention in the center of the frame, right? And then we have suitors to the left and suitors to the right, and everything is sort of arranged on the grid, right? So beyond the rule of thirds, we've got a couple of other compositional techniques you can employ. This one is called the golden ratio. So you remember that staircase in the Vatican I showed you earlier? Here is the mathematical expression of that compositional leading thought from the Vatican staircase. Do you see it? Right? The idea is the human eye instinctively will go to one of two places in a visual frame. It'll either go to the center of the detail, it'll go to the focal point, having been subconsciously directed there by elements in the frame, right? In this case, it's the Mona Lisa's nose, right? Or the eyes will seek a detail at the edge of frame. In other words, if this is somehow too busy for the eye to pick a central point of focus, the eye will then, or the brain, I should say, will then seek another route. It'll go to the edge of the frame and look for a relevant detail there, and then follow the path of relevant details towards what will inevitably be the central idea or the central point of focus, right? And here it's working with the Mona Lisa's hands, right? There's a lot of strangeness going on with the horizons of the Mona Lisa. They're not lining up correctly. There's a lot of detail here, a lot of odd contrast, and you either go right to the eyes, or a lot of people say the first thing they tend to see when they look at the Mona Lisa is her hands for whatever reason. So the golden ratio here is suggesting that the hands are the beginning of this mental path that our eyes and brain are taking through the details of this composition, and eventually leading us in a concentric path towards the focus of the image. It's landing on the tip of her nose, but that's only because it precedes her eyes by about an inch, inch and a half. And so the nose would come into focus first, and then the eyes, right? It's taking you basically right here. And then the eyes follow you around the room as you walk around and look at the Mona Lisa, okay? This is, if you could plot mathematically this path, it would look like a nautilus shell. And that nautilus shell is a mathematical principle that can be illustrated by a sequence of numbers called the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is basically an expression of integers that says, if you add up the first two numbers in a series of numbers, they will equal or sum the third number. And then sequentially ever after, the two, each successive number is the sum of the previous two. So 1 in the center, and then another 1 as we move to the outside. 1 plus 1 is 2. That becomes the third integer. 2 equals 1 plus 1. 1 plus 2 equals 3. 3 equals 2 plus 1. 5 equals 3 plus 2. 8 equals 5 plus 3. 13 equals 8 plus 5. 21 equals 13 plus 8. And numerically, if you could plot it on a graph, it does this, that spiral, and goes way over here. Okay, starting with the integer 1. So if you're following that kind of notion compositionally, you might find things in the art world that conform to this apparent pattern, right? Here's the girl with the pearl earring. There's a vertical and a horizontal composition that both seem to apply the golden ratio or the Fibonacci rule to the composition. If you look at the horizontal composition, you can see where there's not much happening in the right of frame over here in the area of her cascading hairdo. But if you look at the center of that Fibonacci in the horizontal proportion, you see that the leading eye is right at the center of point of focus. And as you look around at the detail, you look at the delicateness of her eyebrow, leads you to the transition shadow on the cheekbone, which leads you around to the delicate expression of the nose and very little shadow on the nose. Then the other eye, the low side eye, and leading us through to the headdress and around to the hairdo and the cascading ponytail and down and out of the frame. And if you look at the vertical is suggesting that, well, what are we looking at? I don't know, but look at the line on her jaw. Look at how subtle the transition, and it leads us right through the earring. From the chin, we follow the jawline around perfectly to the earring, and then from the earring up to the hair, to the bun, through the headdress, and we end up on the headdress. And you might argue, well, this isn't really a detail of particular interest. Well, we've already seen the namesake of the composition is called the girl with the pearl earring. We saw that right away. Here's the pearl earring. We followed the girl's jawline around through her earlobe, through her hair, and to the top of her head. And then that was the vertical perception of the image. And then we switch, our brain switches, and then we look across it horizontally and we go to the eye and we go around to out of the frame. If we take that and impose it over this image of two pensioners on the wrought iron bench outside of this little villa in, looks like Italy. This lady is striking up a conversation. She's at the point of focus. And as we run the Fibonacci around, we look around at her. She's on the bench. We come around. She's sitting with her friend. We come up and see they're in front of a villa. And then as we explore the rest of the frame, our eyes are led down the wrought iron railing on the descending staircase and out of frame over here. You could argue, and for me, it works in the reverse. I am visually attracted to the staircase right away. And so, and also because I'm left-handed and left-brained, my eye will go to the lower left of the frame and work in the opposite direction and end up over here. So if you're right-handed or left-handed might also describe how you approach these compositional rules and how you see these images. I see the staircase first. Where are they going? Down to nothing here. Well, what else is in the frame? Oh, an Italian villa. Oh, interesting. Oh, we got two pensioners on a bench and this one's trying to strike up a conversation. Bang. The image is about two women on vacation in Italy sitting outside feeding the pigeons. You can also apply it to Full Metal Jacket. So here is a scene from the Stanley Kubrick, arguably his magnum opus. I don't know. Maybe you don't feel that way. Anybody here not seen Full Metal Jacket? That's 2 for 2, Marcus. We got to get you into the video store or get you a Netflix subscription or something, man. Okay, so what do we have here? Who's seen Full Metal Jacket? Who wants to tell me what's going on here? I'm doing all the talking. Shall I forge ahead? Okay. What we have here is Boot Camp. It is a period piece. It's taking place in the waning years of Vietnam, right? 68, 70 maybe. We have two guys that went to, well, we have the story's focusing on three guys, really. One of the guys isn't present in this particular shot. So the other two, we have Private Pile on the right of frame, and we have Private Joker on the left of frame, Matthew Modine and Vincent D'Onofrio. Okay. In this particular film, Vincent D'Onofrio is somewhat of a simpleton. He's a mama's boy. He's very non-complex individual, let's say, and he is not adapting to boot camp in the Marine Corps at all. He's screwing up, and he's screwing up a lot, and he's causing trouble for his company, because if one man in the company screws up, the entire company suffers the consequences and the discipline. So the company is tired of him. They're tired of his crap. They don't understand why he can't knuckle down and learn the same things they're learning and adapt to the skills and the mindset of becoming a Marine. And they all know that they're going to get shipped out to Vietnam once they graduate from boot camp, and that's creating a level of anxiety. They don't all agree with the war either. Private Joker has his nickname because he is an open skeptic of the foreign policy that is sending him to Vietnam as a Marine in the first place. We don't go into why they're in the Marine Corps. We just know that they're there and they're trying to make the best of it, and Pyle is screwing up. And in this scene, Matthew Modine has been placed in charge of Pyle's growth and success or failure in this particular boot camp class of inductees. If we look at the golden ratio here and apply it to this frame, you can see that really the central point of focus is at this moment, Matthew Modine. Why? Matthew Modine is tired of his shit. This guy has screwed up. He's had to do hundreds and hundreds of push-ups and run many, many miles as punitive results of this guy not being able to pull his own weight. The DI, the drill instructor who's in charge of educating these men in the ways of becoming a Marine, has reached his limit of patience with this man, and he has pawned his responsibility off on Matthew Modine, and Matt's not happy about it. One of the things that Private Pyle was not capable of understanding apparently was right shoulder arm, left shoulder arm when they are marching on this is the tarmac of the graduation field where they hold the ceremonies for the audience when the guys have graduated. And in one of the scenes prior to this, the drill instructor slaps Private Pyle on the left side of his face and says, "What side was that?" And then slaps him on the right side of his face and says, "What side was that?" And he exhausts himself with slapping Private Pyle to the point where he says, "He's now your problem. If he doesn't succeed, it will be your fault." And he sends these two guys out alone. And now Modine has to drill Private Pyle until Private Pyle succeeds or dies trying. So here he is at the center of all of this, because we've seen that buildup now through the beginning of the movie. We look here first, and as our eyes go around, we see, Matthew Modine is demonstrating left shoulder arms to Private Pyle. Look at the composition. That barrel's going right out, exactly out the upper left of frame. And we come around with our eyes and we see that it is standing at attention, left shoulder arms, and our eyes lead us around to Private Pyle, and look at Private Pyle's face. We see that he's finally got the rifle shouldered on the correct side. And as we go out of the frame, we see the rest of the company drilling in the background without these two guys. Life has moved on without these two men, and something has to be done about it. And then our eyes go out of the frame, and we are looking forward to the next scene to see what happens to these guys next. You could argue that the rule of thirds is also functioning here. If you look, Matthew Modine is at the intersection of the left vertical and horizontal 1/3 right here. And Pyle is directly opposite him on the right side of the converging horizontal and vertical compositional lines.
Specifically his eyes.
His eyes are right there, aren't they? And look at his eyes. Look at his eyes. They're questioning, and they're looking at Matthew Modine. Am I doing this right? You see?
Yep. Duh.
Right. And he's not looking at Pyle, is he? He's looking straight out of the frame along the horizontal line, along the top horizontal line, as if to say, stand at attention. This isn't time for stupid questions. If you're not getting smacked in the head, you probably got it right. When are you going to learn to just do what you're told and not respond? Right? This is a disciplinary moment from Matthew Modine towards Vincent D'Onofrio. Further on in the movie, the guys have graduated boot camp. Private Pyle didn't make it. For those of you who've seen the movie, you understand he shot himself with his rifle. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert, Private Pyle doesn't make it. The group ends up in Vietnam, just like we knew they would, right? They have come into the company of other soldiers, and they have met now Sergeant, who then becomes, I believe, Captain Cowboy. And we meet Adam Baldwin, who is nicknamed Animal Mother, and a number of other guys in the platoon. This is Matthew Modine's partner. He's a photographer. Modine, Joker, ends up working for Stars and Stripes because of his cynical nature and his intellect, and he gets shipped to the media division of the Marine Corps. And they get lumped in or embedded with this group of guys led by Cowboy and Animal Mother. In this scene, they sent one of the members of the platoon out to investigate some bombed out buildings before they all rush in and take a look around. They're looking for North Vietnamese regulars hiding out. They're chasing them further and further back north over the DMZ. And the forward scout gets shot. And he's laying out there in no man's land, right? They call it, between a sniper and where these guys have taken cover behind these broken up pieces of concrete. And the sniper has shot their scout. He's rolling around in pain, but he's not dead. And Cowboy understands that this is a trap. This is something that they do a lot. They'll lure two guys out to go and try to get their buddy. And when they grab him up, the sniper will shoot all three guys and kill three birds with, minimal amount of bullets expended, right? And so they're all kind of hiding behind here, trying to figure out what to do. And Animal Mother he feels a kinship with the man who's been wounded. He's a black man in the movie that he's been harassing verbally throughout the whole movie at this point. And it's a dark comedic look at the racist mentality of a guy from the South who in any other circumstances and walks of life would probably not like the man who's been shot, but because he's in his platoon and because he is a fellow soldier, a fellow Marine, he's not about to accept the fate that's going to happen to his friend. And he says, if you guys are too chicken shit to go out and get him, I will. And he grabs up his rifle and he's going to go out there and rescue the guy. And so in this moment, it's a very intense moment. It's a shift in consciousness for Animal Mother. It's also showing the inaction and the inability to act on the part of the rest of the guys in the unit. And if you apply the golden rule to this composition, I think you can see it happening. Do you see it? Can you see it? Is it a horizontal or vertical composition?
Horizontal.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, horizontal, because it's going from the guys in the back and it's going straight up to the face of Animal Mother.
But we know where the point of focus is, right?
Yeah.
It's
The people in the back. It's actually the point of focus is supposed to be that, but we're starting down here at the people, the troops.
The point of focus is Animal Mother. Animal Mother says, nobody gets to kill my guy, just because I beat up on him verbally when we're on R&R doesn't mean that I'm going to sit by and watch him get slaughtered. It's
That's
Animal Mother having a shift of mental consciousness. And so there it is. There's our Fibonacci start right there. No effing way. And then it goes around to his bullets on his chest, his 50 caliber, and the guy standing by going, no way, don't do it, you're going to get shot. And then we're out of the frame, and the next thing we see is the reverse angle of the buildings and the sniper looking out at them. So it kind of takes us through his mental shift to his means of resolving the problem, to his resolve, and at the expense of the guys who are too scared to act. They are the last thought in the frame before we leave to the next image. Does that make sense?
The reason why I said horizontal is because I'm looking at the two soldiers in the bottom left.
Mhm.
And
These
to
guys.
me, yes, those guys. And to me, it looks like the frame is divided into sort of the ratio quadrants of the golden ratio, where you have the half of a square on the left side of the screen. And then there's another larger half on the right side of the screen.
Right.
And there's a blank area in the top left that
Yes.
doesn't have much there.
Right.
But I was thinking that
Negative
it was
space.
horizontal, where it starts where the curl starts at the soldiers, and then it loops around to Animal Mother.
Oh, so you want to flip the ratio up on the other way. You want to start here and go like this.
Yes.
Then you would end up basically right here, which is also, I think, a valid theory, because this, what the bullets represent, is at the core of Animal Mother's ideology, which is shoot first and ask questions later. He is the epitome of the warrior, and we see that demonstrated in his actions in scenes prior to this. We learn that he's a very aggressive, confident, sort of not really intellectual. He's not trying to reason out the reason for why he's there or what his moral objectives are. He just understands that he's in a situation that has to be dealt with a certain way, and he has chosen his means of expression to be his machine gun. So yeah, there could be a lot of validity to that. It starts down here through a group of guys unwilling to act. We see Mother is willing to act, and we come around and we find his means of resolving the problem, and his ideology at his heart is bullets, beans and bullets. Right?
Kind of sounds
Yeah,
like a
that
Animal
works.
Mother from the description of Animal Mother kind of sounds like a foil to Forrest Gump a little bit.
Maybe. You also said something interesting, Marcus, about quadrant theory, and I'm going to talk to you about that next. In quadrant theory, which is what they use in the movie Drive, or was symbolized here in Drive, you divide the frame in half, vertically or horizontally, dealer's choice. In this case, if we go vertically, we have Animal Mother on the left, standing alone, and we have the cowering soldiers in the left of frame squatting together. We have negative space up here, and they are in the lower quadrant. He is alone, ethically, morally, figuratively, allegorically, and he is in the upper, you could argue he's in the upper quadrant right here. He is alone in his resolve to go out and help his friend when the rest of the guys are willing to sit around and watch him get shot. And he is higher in hierarchy in the frame to these guys, so that he must have the ethical higher ground here. He's going to go rescue his friend. These guys are going to watch him get shot, and they have negative space up here to where it is they apparently can't ascend to the higher virtue of rescuing the buddy that Animal Mother has chosen to do. So you could argue the quadrant theory in this image as well. I don't know about the rule of thirds necessarily, because of the way they've got Animal Mother almost in the center of the frame. It's a little hard to argue for this right 1/3 here versus the left 1/3, but you got a lower happening in the center of the lower 1/3. You got his gun, his weapon, and you've got the other guys that are afraid to go forward over here. You got nothing in this big section, and then we got Animal kind of hovering in the center of the top 1/3. There might be an argument to be made there. It's a weak one for the rule of thirds. It's better as the Fibonacci golden rule or quadrant theory, and quadrant theory is next. So in this shot, and this was Newton Thomas Siegel shooting Drive, and they're applying the quadrant theory to the compositional procedures in this film. You divide the frame in half vertically, you divide the frame in half horizontally, and then you place items in the frame according to their hierarchy. So there's nothing in the lower right. We've got Ryan Gosling's body in the lower left and his head in the upper left. He's maintaining the left of frame. There's nobody in the right of frame. But then we have this interesting situation where he's what we call short framed, meaning he's on the left of frame, looking left out of frame, as opposed to right out of frame. The long look takes us through the center of the frame and out the other side, which has a positive connotation. And a short framed composition means he's standing on the left of frame and looking, taking the shorter look line out of frame left, which is a negative connotation. So it's interesting that he's positioned left of frame, looking left. And maybe what we're supposed to feel from that is uneasiness. We're unsure. What is he looking at? And not feeling good about it. Whereas the psychological underpinnings of placing him in the right of frame, looking through the frame, through the center and out the opposite side, has a similar psychological effect on us as the converging lines, right? Leading to, a promise of something on the other end. So it's interesting that there's sort of a dual message going on here within this frame. Now, since you mentioned quadrant theory, Marcus, what do you think of this setup?
I'm not too sure. I more see the rule of thirds here, but as far as quadrants go, you have Ryan Gosling in the upper left quadrant. He's the main focus, and his body is in the lower quadrant. And as you said, he's looking to the left and he's in frame left. And so to me, I see this as a sort of, like you said, uncertainty, not necessarily a negative thing, but more of just there's something coming and we don't know whether it's good or bad necessarily.
That's for sure. That interpretation is spot on, right? There's something coming and we're not exactly sure what it is.
And then there's the exit sign that's in the right side, and it's mostly in the right quadrant, but it's more on the line. And I don't know if that exit sign is important or not, but it could be that this is his way out is over there and he's looking away from it.
You nailed it, babes. You nailed it. Have you seen Drive?
No, I haven't seen it.
You have. All the better. That means that your analysis and deconstruction of this image has hit a home run. In this film, Ryan Gosling is a Hollywood stuntman, and he has a dual nature to his lifestyle. During the day, he has his day job driving cars as a stuntman for Hollywood Pictures. At night, he has an alter ego. He drives getaway cars for people that rob banks and do unsavory things, right? And he has a persona as driver, as he's known in the underworld, and he wears the Mazda Grand Prix gloves with the hole on the knuckles, and he wears this satin jacket with embroidery on the back, and he has this subcultural persona of this mystery man who is very successful at helping people commit unsavory deeds and get away with it. But it's an unfulfilling life for him. He's made a lot of money doing it, but it's the same thing over and over all the time until he gets called to do this job where he has to pick up a passenger and then protect that passenger through the remainder of the movie from people who are pursuing her to do her harm. Turns out it's a pretty girl, right? So here comes his conflict. He falls in love with her. She likes him. He's thinking to himself, why do I keep doing this? I should quit. I should get out. Exit sign, right? He's looking off frame left. He's short framed because he doesn't know what the future holds. He doesn't know that things are going to end very badly. But he's looking in the reverse in the next set of downs, in the next series of images, the reverse is revealed to us. We see her. They've chosen a motel to hide in for the night to rest. He's going on his way to his room, and he has rented her a room down the hallway. He's looking at her as she's going into her room, right? And he's thinking, my life could go very well if I just get away with her and we live happily ever after, right? And she looks at him and gives him an encouraging look as well. So he's looking off at her, short framed this way, and he's thinking about getting out of his lifestyle that he's been leading because it's going nowhere. There's nothing over here, right? It's going nowhere. So you could look at that as an interpretation of this image using the quadrant theory. I think it's interesting that you also said it could possibly be the rule of thirds. The only thing I'm seeing is on the left 1/3, he's occupying the entire vertical horizontal axis on the frame left side. That's true. On the frame right side, though, for 6 blocks, there's really not much going on except the exit sign in the middle far right 1/3. So yes, it conforms to that, but in the quadrant sense of things, where these lines are supposed to be leading our eyes towards something, arguably the vertical line is taking us down to the satin jacket. The horizontal line is taking us to his chakra. He's in love with the girl and he's looking for a way out, right? You nailed it, man. You nailed it. That's awesome. Anybody else see that or have a different opinion about what this might be?
More so in the line. I don't think it's going down to the jacket, more like going up to the face.
Maybe, but if you think about the psychology of Western literature, we start at the top of the page and move down, right? We don't stop at the bottom of the page and look up. That's a protocol assigned to a different kind of culture, which you don't belong to, I'm guessing. Although it's interesting that you look down first and look up, right? I look up and then down. But I think that, okay, if you want to follow that reasoning, you're starting at the satin jacket and you're looking up, but we don't really, on this axis, we don't really get to Ryan Gosling. We just kind of go out through the shadow of the ceiling.
That's where I think the other line comes in, because you're looking at, because really I think these are like splitting into three areas. This is how I look at it. There's 4 separate shots, and the 2 shots you need to look at are the top 2. Those are the 2 most important shots.
Yeah.
The exit sign and Gosling's face.
I would agree with that.
So I look at it as that the shot with Gosling's face is the number 1 shot. After that is the exit sign. Because Gosling's closer to the camera than the exit sign. Yeah. And as a result, to me in film, the most important facet of any character is the facial expression.
Absolutely. So there's more context in this upper quadrant than there is in any of the remaining 3, except there's subtext in this quadrant, the exit sign.
Yeah.
This is the subtext of the story. He wants out. This is what's going on. This is performance. This is the message. He is lovingly looking at the girl, the object of his protection at this point, and he's contemplating a better life. There's a lot of room for interpretation here. Don't listen to what I'm telling you and take it as gospel, right? I'm giving you kind of the traditional interpretations here of what this stuff is, and then absolutely feel free, if you see something else there, to pipe up and express that difference, because there is very likely ample validity on your part, right? This is part of how you know what kind of a shooter you are, how you compose your images, where you put elements in the frame, how you see things. It becomes a very expressive way of understanding you as a creative image maker, right? How do you handle the elements within your frame? What do you put on your canvas? What do you leave out? right? It's all very important, and you almost can't be wrong. And if you take a position that's counterintuitive to the traditional analysis, it doesn't necessarily make you wrong as long as you understand what the differences are, and you can argue your side like you've just done, Andrew, in support of how you see it, understanding how the traditional interpretations balance in a different direction, right? It's like knowing the rules and then knowing how you can break them, right? Basically is what I get, what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I kind of get, because before Phil and I started in theater, and I took this as like as a blocking approach, because
Yeah.
while the lines are supposed to lead, because I understand the lines are supposed to lead us somewhere, but I just see the lines dividing into 4 separate parts of a stage, and each one has a key point of importance. You know,
Stage left, stage right, up stage, down stage.
up stage left in this case would be the most vital.
Yeah, right here. Cool. Interesting. The theater approach. I never thought of that. That's cool. I might borrow that next semester. Okay, where was I? All right, so let's now start thinking about framing. What do we got? We got shots. We got types of shots. I asked you guys to do an assignment a week or so ago, and part of that assignment was show me 3 shots or 4 shots, I think I asked you for. And I wanted to see how you would interpret the directives wide, medium, and close up, because I wanted to get a sense of what you think close is and what you think wide is and what you think the middle is, what's represented by the middle. We use these terms specifically to refer to very specific framing: wide, long shot, extreme long shot, medium close up, big close up, extreme close up, and insert. We have very specific notions visually of what the elements should look like in those frames and how they might be arranged. Okay, so the reasoning behind the exercise was to see if you naturally go to those traditional solutions, or if you have different ideas about, and usually it's around the medium shot. A lot of people aren't quite sure where the middle of the road is between a really wide shot and the shot maybe of a watch face. Okay, they're not sure where the midpoint is. And so it was important to see that and understand who I'm dealing with. Here are some examples of a wide shot, a medium shot, and a close-up, a standard, more or less a standard close-up. Okay, a little bit tighter than the standard close-up. Here's a wide shot. Now, a lot of you in a wide shot showed me in the entire world that was due west of your camera. And that was everything: the parking lot, the park bench, the tree, the other tree, the people on the bench talking, somebody in the background, a car parked behind them. I saw everything. A wide shot doesn't necessarily mean we see the entire world in this direction. A wide shot just means we see enough of the world to know where our characters are, what direction they might be headed in, and what their basic action is, right? So we have To Kill a Mockingbird, we got Atticus in the courtroom, and he's arguing for his defense. So we see people in the background. We see the prosecutor and the prosecuting witness. We see the defendant. We see Atticus, and he is gesturing in some grand fashion. He's giving us some lofty platitude about what this case represents in terms of society, more than just, is it a man's word against the girl's word? It's more, much more than that. And he's giving us this impassioned speech, right? But we need to see that action. We need to see the arms outstretched and the gesture that indicates bigger than ourselves kind of notion of what he's defending. And it's a wide frame. We don't see him head to toe. We don't have to. There's really nothing important unless his shoes are an important detail for some reason. We don't need to see his feet. We don't need to see anything below the knee, really. So this qualifies as a long or a wide shot. An establishing shot might be the front of the courtroom, because the establishing shot, the only purpose of that is to show us where we are. So if you want to include an establishing shot of the outside of the courthouse, that's up to you. One school of thought says we must know where we are. The other school of thought says, if you can't look at this frame right here and figure out that you're in a courtroom, then we probably haven't composed the image correctly. Because in what other walk of life have you seen two small tables out front, side by each, a lawyer here, a defendant here, an accuser here, a gallery of onlookers, and this guy is arguing something and he's looking high up and out of frame over here, presumably at a judge on a dais. I mean, if you don't understand you're in a courtroom from this image, not even seeing the movie before, then it's probably a bad composition. So you don't need to see Atticus head to toe. You don't need to be all the way in the back corner so we see the judge and the rest of the courtroom at the same time. That's a little bit too much exposition, and it's a little bit like we're not working hard enough for a decent composition here. We're just going with bang. We call it high, wide, and stupid. Way back in the corner, up high, so we see everything on the widest lens in the box. And that's not creatively accomplishing a whole lot. Okay. So our wide shots in many cases are a tad too wide. Okay. When in doubt, close down a little bit. Or if it's not a zoom lens and you're on a 20 millimeter, go to a 24 and see what that looks like. And you can probably, or even a 35 if you want to be aggressive, and you can probably find an equally compelling frame with a better opportunity to arrange elements more compositionally, right? It's really, really hard with really, really wide frames to get good compositions because things like distortion happen in really, really wide lenses. Vertical lines don't look vertical anymore. They look like they're falling over. People get very demonstrably misshapen in the foreground versus people in the background. It's hard to get depth of focus differences. The background and the foreground are in focus on a really wide lens, so you don't have much of a depth of field advantage. Wide lenses generally suck for most stuff, except if you're in a really tight space and you got no room to move, and if you put a 50 or a 35 on the camera, all you see is this looking at you from the other side of the room. I mean, if you need to see more of the character in a really tight space, you need a really wide lens. Or if you got a really big structure you want to look at, a really big set or an arrangement, and you want to do an establishing shot, there's where your wide lenses are. Otherwise, you really don't need wide lenses. Okay. Here's a medium shot. Medium shot generally crops people at the belt buckle. Let's call it the belt buckle, right? Or the waist, right? But some people think the waist is above the belt, right? So if that's the case, then it's not necessarily a medium anymore. It's a medium close-up. All right, so a true medium shot's going to crop at the belt buckle or at the pockets. Pockets of your jeans, right? Those are below the belt buckle, right? If you go mid-thigh, it's a different kind of a medium. It's a looser medium. And we have a very specific name for a shot like that. It's called a cowboy shot. Whenever you see an actor from mid-thigh up with very little headroom, right? It was a shot that happened a lot in the Westerns in the 50s and 60s when we were doing a lot of cowboy movies, because they thought it was important to see the gun and the gun belt riding on the hip of the cowboy when he's walking around in the scene, right? Let's see the gun, because they might have a gunfight, and when they have a gunfight, he's going to reach for his gun. If he reaches out of frame on a true medium, we don't see the pistol being pulled out of the holster, right? So they include the gun in the holster in the shot in the loose medium for a movie like that. So we call it specifically a cowboy angle, right, or cowboy frame. But a traditional medium is along the belt line or the pockets on your jeans, okay? So this is a pretty good seated medium, right? So it's still trying to crop him at the waist. We got, 1 or 2 fingers of headroom above here before the top of frame. And so this frame is specifically to show us a better view of the action and to get a general understanding of the dialogue, okay? The minute we emphasize dialogue, we go to a close-up frame. So the close-up is specifically designed to show the audience the very relevant dialogue, the important dialogue. You can have less important dialogue in a medium shot and a better look at the action and the interpersonal performance. daughter hugs daddy on when he comes home from work, right? This is a moment between a father and a daughter. We don't want to see it in a wide shot like this. We don't get to see faces. We can see more of the faces in here, so we can see physical performance closer in the medium shot than in the wide shot. But when she says, daddy, I don't understand what you've been doing, what you're doing, we want to see that in a close-up, because we want to see the expression now, the facial performance that's going to happen when we hear that critical dialogue. Or daddy, I love you, what, you know, I'm glad you're home, you know, whatever that is happening in this frame. Okay, so there are reasons for each of these frames. Broad understanding of the action and who's involved in the scene, closer look at the action and closer physical performance, critical dialogue. Okay, that's the reason for each of these sizes. That's the editor's version of composition, right? I want to know where you are and who's with you. I want to know how you feel about the girl in general terms, and then I want her to hear I love you in the tight shot. Okay, that makes sense? All you cutters out there? Okay. So if we take into account all the things we've been talking about here for the last hour and a half, 2 hours, almost 2 hours, these are images that were selected at RTHS Web Productions as examples of bad framing. So in each of these frames, can you give me some idea of why they might be considered bad compositional choices? Anybody?
In the bottom right picture, the top of the woman's forehead and hair is cut off.
Yeah, we gave her a haircut, we call it. And really for no reason, right? It's a medium shot, but if it was framed correctly as a medium, we would have cropped her probably a little bit higher down here, which would have afforded a little bit more headroom up here. In a medium, we want 2 or 3 fingers above the head. So you see like that or like that, right? Or 1 finger. This is called a haircut, where I crop out some of the rest of my profile. Okay. So yeah, if we had done a proper medium on her, we would have probably framed up a little bit and included a little bit more of her hair here. What else? Very good, by the way. That's exactly right.
The picture on the left corner, there's way too much headroom.
Way too much headroom. Like, what's the central feature of that image?
The guy.
The guy. What's he doing?
Standing looking at the camera.
He's just standing there. He's not doing anything provocative or ironic. There's no performance. He's just kind of standing there, you know, looking at the camera like a deer in the headlights. Why then would we make him so small in the frame? Would that be a metaphorical statement that he's a small part of a much larger world? Maybe, but if we don't know the story that's going on with this image, all we can do is work with the tools that we have, which would be the basic rules of composition, which would indicate that this is bad framing for him. Why would we crop him at the waist and give him an entire half a frame of negative space above him, which has a seriously negative connotation, by the way? Why wouldn't we get in closer? Because maybe he's got something to say, but we're not going to see it as, you know, facial performance from way back here on what looks like at least a 24 mil lens. There's not much to glean here as an audience. We got to get in there. If nothing's happening, get right in there for the facial performance, at least a medium with 2 or 3 fingers of headroom to see the general dialogue and the basic action he's going to perform. And then if there's still nothing happening, get right in there and say, what's up? Right. So this is a big waste of time. He's also, what did I call this before? Look where his head is. Where's the horizon in this image?
Behind him.
You can kind of see it right here, right?
Yeah.
It's the grasses, you know, at the base of the trees, and it's running exactly in the center of the frame. And oop, boop, there's his loaf right there. bullets. Remember I called it bullets? He's bullets in the frame. You're like going, get off that somehow. When I was younger and I was in the camera department, I would hear the director yell a lot to the operator, he's bullets in the frame. Get off that center point, put him somewhere else in the frame. Give him some asymmetrical balance so we can have some kind of lively composition here that might speak to the audience. This composition doesn't really say anything to the audience. A centered character is the only character. Well, all right, there's two characters that occupy the exact center of a frame, compositionally speaking. The first character is the totally balanced, spiritually balanced character. No conflict, all righteousness, all knowing, all positive, right? Center of the frame. The other person that occupies the center of the frame is the person walking the tightrope between two choices, between good and evil, between life and death, between sickness and health, right? That's the other character, the conflicted character, right? So by putting him in the center of the frame, but then putting his head right in the very center point of the frame and giving him all that headroom, almost makes me think negatively about this guy, and that might not be a fair assessment of him at all. But because of where the author put him in the frame, I'm not feeling good about it. So for a lot of those reasons and many more probably that we haven't offered up here, this is not good framing. Too much headroom is bad no matter how you slice it. So if you just want to walk away with that little nugget of wisdom, too much headroom is a bad thing. Avoid it at all costs. Movies are about people, not about sky. Okay? So avoid too much headroom at all costs. So, okay, having said all of that, then what's so bad about this one?
The lines.
I'm not sure what that is, or if that's not a superimposition from the article it was pulled from. Let's assume that line isn't actually there.
There's like there's no bokeh at all.
I see bokeh.
Yeah, but it's like really bad.
Well, bad and non-existent, I think, are two different things. But yeah, maybe the lens is not manufactured really well, or it could be. I don't know, man. The bokeh balls are pretty big. Maybe they're bigger than spectral highlights in the background, and they didn't really diffuse as well as they would if they were point sources. Point sources, you know, they fuzz out real nice. If it's like a sign that has, you know, some dimension to it and it's in the background, it might not bokeh out very well. It might just become an out of focus blob. And that might be the situation going on here. I can't say for sure. But
No,
yeah,
like,
the bokeh's not as nice as what did we have up here? We had some pretty nice bokeh up here.
Yeah.
Where was it?
Yeah.
That's pretty nice, right?
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Yeah.
Right. Happy little bokeh balls, happy little bokeh, right? And down here, it's like, meh, you know.
It's like a blob. It's like a blob.
But what else?
It's just like it's like the shadows. Like no, it's like what's the context behind it?
The lighting is pretty high key and low contrast, right? There's not a lot of shadow here, which would indicate some kind of character depth going on.
Yeah, but we don't know what it
The
is.
shadows are what we call full or open. They're not real dark. The highlight is, you know, it's a Rembrandt key, but when you light the shadows this brightly, it kind of ruins the shape that was, you know, suggested by the Rembrandt key. So the lighting kind of foiled the image. She's also right in the middle of the frame. But she's not looking directly at the lens, so we can't assume that she's a balanced spiritual individual, because she's looking, it looks like she's looking off frame left over here.
She's looking down, yeah. She's looking down frame left a little bit.
So she's sort of just been clumsily dropped into the center of the frame. I think a more effective composition would have been to put her on the right 1/3 line, so that as she looked off frame in this direction, it would have a more positive connotation. But right now it's just, we don't know, is, you know, why is she in the middle? and she's looking, this makes her technically short framed because she's looking at the shortest route out of frame from her position. If she was over here on the right 1/3, she would have been looking through the center and then out of frame, which is looking at your situation as it presently stands and looking into the future by insinuating that long look line out of frame. Short look line out of frame is considered negative. Long look line out of frame is considered positive. Okay.
It just kind of reminds me of this one scene from like the fourth Superman movie where it's just like with the lines, it's just like it's like weird.
Yeah. I blame the MTV generation, which unfortunately was my generation. And that was that MTV, in an effort to gain a firm market share very quickly and at a low cost, they didn't hire a lot of experienced professionals. They hired a lot of young, striving and up and comers who didn't necessarily know all the proper rules of filming and composition and all of that. And so they were more open to trying things and just winging it, so to speak. And as a result, winging it became an aesthetic virtue, right? And the virtue of proper composition and proper framing and proper execution of pans and tilts and camera moves became supplanted by the good enough philosophy of an up and coming generation who wasn't fully invested in the craft of learning cinematography from an established and accomplished practitioner. Okay.
So basically, winging it became virtue signaling for film.
Winging it became the modus operandi. It was like, well, there's a positive virtue that we can find in here if we dig deep enough, which is don't be rigid, be open to the possibilities of the undiscovered happy accident, they call it, right? Okay, I'm all for that, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's say, okay, I understand what the traditional course of action would be, like with this frame. We should put her over here if she's going to look off frame left so that we can have that positive connotation. We should throw a couple of scrims in or dim down our fill light so that we get a little bit more shape out of our lighting. And in doing those things, we can elicit some emotion out of our audience that this frame just is not getting, right? And then you can look at that and you can say, well, yeah, maybe you're feeling it now, or maybe you're not. What else can we do to this if you're not feeling it? And then maybe that's when you start looking around for, a happy accident. Maybe you move the camera and shift the background a little bit. And when doing that, you find some highlights back of that bokeh out nicer than what you currently got, or you take a higher angle looking down to if she's feeling blue, or you take a lower angle looking up if she's feeling confident, right? You can change the attitude of your lens and the point of view of the lens. You can change your lighting. You can change your depth of field. You can start playing with all the compositional variables that you have at your disposal as an educated filmmaker, instead of hunting and pecking in the dark, looking for something that, it just looks good, because you didn't bother to take the time to learn what the compositional tenets of cinematography are. And then you decide what ones are good and you want ones you don't need, but arm yourself with something. Don't go into a situation uneducated and unaware, okay? Because that's kind of a fool's errand. If you walk into something unqualified or unready for the possibilities, you have gone in at a severe disadvantage, right? So it's to your credit that, you're in film school and you're learning these things so that, like I said, learn the rules and why they are rules. And then and only then are you qualified to throw the ones out that you don't subscribe to or you don't think work well, right? That's the only way to do it. You can't walk in from the word go and say, I don't need the rule book. That's for, that's for rubes. That's for chumps. I'm just going to go in and shoot from the seat of my pants. That's, the odds of being successful doing that are worse than winning the lottery, I think.
That's pretty much the basic of it. Pretty much the basic when it comes to what I can do. That's why I said winning is basically cinematic virtue signaling.
I can tell you that there's too much riding on Hollywood films and Endeavor to be winging it all the time. Okay. The only thing they want to be engaged in is the sure thing. They were successful on the last movie shooting it that way. They want to shoot this movie the same way. And they don't want to argue with you about it because you're new. You weren't there the last time. You're new on this one. Just do what we tell you. Please give us what we want. This is what made us money before, and we want to make money again. Right? So winging it is a real bad approach to problem solving in Hollywood. It will get you replaced really fast. And I have heard that, and I have seen it happen, right? I've seen it happen on more than one movie where, you know, I saw a DP one night sitting on set on an Academy Award winning movie. And I was standing right next to him, and he kind of looked at the set, and I had just finished, you know, lighting a bunch of stuff. I was about to walk out and let them shoot. And he says, I really don't know what to do here right now. And I looked around, I was like, oh shit. That's not the kind of thing you need to be admitting in this crowd. And a week and a half later, he was replaced. So winging it is a bad strategy. Okay. Much better to have a plan. If you have a plan, you don't have to use it. You can always throw it away if you see something better, but have a plan and work it out intellectually, and use, you know, these types of strategies to help you sort out what is required of your cinematography. Don't try to, you know, pull it out of the seat of your pants. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to pull it off. And then you're going to get a reputation of being somebody that doesn't get the job done. Okay, that's enough of that soapbox. Okay, types of angles, composition and framing. Low angle shot. I'm just talking about the low angle shot. If you look at a subject from a low angle looking up, what kind of psychological or emotional connotation does that have?
This I remember this when I talked about this last week. It denotes power and authority.
Whose power and authority?
The person in the frame. For example,
yes,
say,
right.
For example, Peter Parker right here in the shot on the left.
Yep.
Like, he's the guy. He's. I think I haven't watched this movie in a while, but I think this is the moment where he's starting to come into that idea of being Spider-Man.
He's warming up to the idea. Yeah. He's seeing the potential for being a superhero. Right. Yeah. He's coming into his power. We're looking up at him. He is now in a position of power, advantage, authority, whatever. Right. So then what's the opposite? We're looking down at this guy in the right of frame here. I believe this is Sunset Boulevard, and I think this guy's a lawyer, or it might be H.G. Wells's Citizen Kane. It might be that lawyer from that movie looking down on him. But either way, looking down on this guy, what is that saying to the audience?
He's not as powerful.
He's not as powerful. He doesn't have the influence, and maybe what else?
He's inferior.
Just pick all of the negative connotations, right? Inferior, weak, sick, you know, no influence, no power, no voice, whatever. We're looking down at him from a position of authority. He serves us, right? Do that thing and then be gone, right? We're looking down at him. The tilts. So we've got a tilt up, tilt down, pan left, pan right. Those are basic camera movements, and those are merely accommodating motion within the frame. Character starts here, walks over here, we got to follow him, right? So we pan one way or the other. We tilt up and down to see things that have more vertical influence in a horizontal frame, right? A building, we look up at the building and then we look down at the front door as the character comes out, right? Or the character's running in. Peter Parker's running in, or who is the kid, the photographer in Superman? He's running in with the information about the news story, and he goes into the door, and then we tilt up when we see the Daily Planet, right? He's going into the newspaper.
Isn't that Jimmy Olsen?
Jimmy Olsen, thank you very much. Give him a prize.
I have one question about tilt. One question about tilt, because there is a scene in Die Hard with the main antagonist. It's called the Dutch. Can we go into a little bit about that one, the Dutch? Because I've heard it denotes danger.
Yeah, well, it is the alternative point of view of reality. What's reality?
It's basically just basically this.
A balanced level frame where the horizon goes neatly across, doesn't necessarily have to go through the middle, but the horizon is never lower on one side than the other in reality, right?
Yeah, and what I'm doing right now with my camera is basically a Dutch. Degree.
Well,
To a degree.
a Dutch, right? So if the world is askew, what does that say psychologically to the audience?
Something's not right.
Something's not right. That's all it has to say, right? It's not perfect. It's not reality. It's skewed. Something's not right. And then performance and dialogue might finish the implication of that angle, right? I used to have a shot of Tom Cruise in a Dutch angle here, but we couldn't decide if it was from The Firm or if it was from another film, and I took it out for some reason. I maintain it was from The Firm, and I maintain it was the moment when he realized the lawyers that he was working for, that he was trying to become a partner with, were crooked and corrupt, and that they were setting him up for a serious fall. And in that moment, the camera stopped seeing his world as rectified and saw his world as coming out of control. Uh-oh, I better figure out a way out of this. This is going to be a problem. And it went Dutch, right? So that's the Dutch angle. It really doesn't have much more implication than that. You assign the rest of the value of that frame through your story and through your performance, right? So if it's indicating somebody that's sick or drunk, we have to see other expository action and dialogue that will fill in the rest of those details, so that when we see this, we see that character as drunk, right? In Birdman, they gave us a Dutch angle of Michael Keaton when he rushes out of the theater, exasperated at Ed Norton, right? And he gets locked out, and then he tries to get back in, and the door's locked, and he's pulling on his robe, right? Because he was not dressed. He was in his underwear and his bathrobe because he was backstage. And he stepped outside to have a cigarette and hotbox it because he was pissed off at Ed Norton. He locks himself out, right? And then in pulling on his bathrobe, he rips it off of his body, and now all of a sudden he's standing there in his civvies on the sidewalk, and he knows he's got to walk around front of the theater and go in the front door because he's locked out and his bathrobe is caught in the door and he's not going to be able to cover himself. So in that moment, as he's walking through the crowd and people are going, "Hey, I know you, you're that guy from the theater," it's all Dutch angled because he's now, right, my situation is foobar, and I can't, I'm nude, I have to play this off somehow and get inside as fast as I can. And so it's a Dutch angle. It's not normal. He is super, super stressed out and exasperated.
The one I was thinking of was like like I mentioned, the Die Hard, the Dutch shot I found. It was mainly from the book. There's a Dutch shot in there of Alan Rickman with another character.
Yes. When we finally meet Hans Gruber face to face, the camera goes like this, right? He's kind of sitting I think he's sitting in a windowsill and he's having a cigarette, and he's talking about how they're going to be earning 6% or whatever, selling the documents. And Bruce sees him for the first time. Their relationship has been over the walkie-talkie up to that point. And then he comes in the room. I think they captured him, and they bring him to Hans. And in that moment, we say, "Oh, here's Hans." And he's talking normally, right? He's very calm and everything. So we don't get the sense of bad guy until the camera goes, "Bad guy," right? So yeah, they do it in Die Hard a couple of times. But that was the first time I believe that he met Hans Gruber, Alan Rickman.
I never figured out that Hans Gruber was the name of the villain.
I think it was Hans Gruber, right?
I don't know. I haven't seen it completely, but I saw a scene where he held a bunch of people hostage and killed some people in there.
Oh yeah. He was a bad guy, but he was one of those kinds of bad guys that does his business real low key, right? Really, really powerful people supposedly don't express a lot of emotion because they're confident in their power and in their ability to get things done. So they don't have to yell at you. They just shoot you if you don't give them what they want. And they understand that there's not going to be any problem there either because they have so much power and influence that nobody's going to care that he shot you. Right. So he just shoots you. He doesn't argue, he shoots you.
That's one of my favorite villains. That's why I like Mr. Freeze so much, because he's technically not a true villain.
Mr. Freeze, Batman, Mr. Freeze,
Yes, Batman, Mr. Freeze.
the Arnold Mr. Freeze, or
No, Heart of Ice from the animated series.
oh, okay,
But he is based on that.
right, okay,
Yes, the backstory is.
all right. I'm not as well versed on that as I maybe am on Superman or maybe Spider-Man, but
Well, there's a few of those too, like Metallo.
Okay.
And Darkseid, which that one's really good. Seeing that relationship between Superman and Darkseid.
okay. All right. Let's see. What else have I got for you? Oh, so in web courses, so I got this neat video. Okay, so Studio Binder is selling a product, right? They've got this whole suite of post-production software and stuff. It's really good. It's a little pricey, but it's really good. But they also produce and they put out these really great videos, and occasionally they have a really good one. And in this case, they've put together a video compilation, and it's all about the camera angles and stuff. And so this is in web courses for you to check out. I think it's 15 minutes long. So it'll be something you can, grab a Coke or a piece of pizza or something, hop on the sofa, get, all comfy and just give it a look, right? And it'll talk about a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about and give you some snippets from contemporary films. And Studio Binder likes to use a lot of Marvel stuff, so you should be very happy about that, Andrew.
I've grown more to DC in recent years. I think Endgame after that was just the end of it.
Oh, have it your way.
I've just been really into the whole Snyderverse thing recently,
That's my tribute to Vasily from The Princess Bride. Oh, have it your way. Okay, what I want to show you now, what I want to show you now is a series of images from the TV series, dun, 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 Mr. Robot. Who here has not seen Mr. Robot? Oh my God. Well, there's spoilers here.
I've seen it.
Sweet. Okay, Trinity, you're my go-to on this one. All right, so there's some spoilers here, folks. Are you inclined to ever watch Mr. Robot? If not, then you won't worry if I reveal some things. If you are, plug your ears. Here we go. All right, I want to show you some images and I want you to tell me what you see principally from all of the stuff that we've talked about this evening, and see if you can nail some of these down. What do you think about this shot right here? I'll tell you that it's from season 1, and I think it is, let's see, it's towards the end of the season. I believe
they're on the run.
Okay, I believe the DP is Todd Campbell. I think. I might be mistaken on that, and I apologize if I am.
I was calling Campbell for this.
Running away, you say?
Yes, I think Campbell's thing was like that these guys are on the run from something, like someone's chasing them. When was this made? Like the year?
Let's see. I want to say there was 4 seasons, and that was over like 2 years ago. So that would be what?
2018, I'm guessing. 2019.
2016 to 2019, 2015 to 2019, something like that.
So probably prior to Stranger Things, because I gained that kind of Stranger Things vibe with this. Like they're on the run.
Yes, I think it precedes
government.
Yeah, I think it precedes Stranger Things by a season, maybe 2.
I think
Andrew, to answer your question, it came out in 2015. First episode did.
So 3 years ago. So 3 years prior to Stranger Things, because that came out in 2018.
And the creator director Sam Ishmael, very talented guy. Okay, so these are the 2 main characters. They are brother and sister. This is Elliot, and do you remember the girl's name? It's help me out, Trinity. You're my phone home. Do you remember her name? I can't. Sister. All right, brother and sister. Elliot is the protagonist, and I'm doing that in quotes because there are questions about his virtue throughout the series. What do you see here going on?
Darlene.
Darlene, thank you very much.
Darlene, I guess, she's looking forward in terms of the plane of the train. She's looking out the window, like directly across from her.
Okay.
What would be straight ahead for her if we were in her point of view? And then Elliot, I guess, is looking to his left out of frame, which to me represents, if I'm getting context clues right, that he's a robot. But like something's askew with his character, something's not right about his character. He's kind of looking to the side.
Well, having not seen the series, you've gotten some of that absolutely right. He's not normal. He's messed up. And we're going to learn how messed up he is in the course of these successive episodes and seasons. He's not a robot. He is suffering from a condition that we don't know in the first season right away. His sister is supportive of him. Elliot is a counterculture computer hacker. So he has a day job working at a company doing IT work. And at night, he's plotting the takedown of the Western world by collapsing the financial system by putting a virus in all of the computers that deal on Wall Street. He wants to collapse the dollar worldwide and restructure world economy with a fairer, more unified distribution of wealth. Okay. He's an idealist. You might argue that he has a really good idea with a really sketchy plan. Okay.
He's a cyber terrorist.
He's not killing anybody necessarily, although the actions that he does could very well lead to the deaths of innocent people. But that's too many degrees of disconnect from his ideological focus, which is simply to collapse the top-down structure of finance in the West and in the world. His sister wants to be supportive of him, and so they're trying to work together, but they have different points of view on how these goals should be accomplished. And so this is why they're not seeing eye to eye. They're looking in different directions. Elliot thinks the solution is this way, and Darlene is looking out the window going, that's the world I used to belong to before I took all this extra burden on my shoulders. Do I really want to do this? So that's the subtext of the shot. But what about other aspects of the shot? Do you see any compositional technique being used here?
Their eyes are like got eye bags on them, like they're tired. They got this, like Darlene's got this I'm sick of this crap look to her.
Well, yeah, there's that, and that is absolutely true.
It's like they just look tired, and the fact they're in opposite directions kind of a sense as an estrangement to me, in my opinion, from based on the shot. If they have difference of opinions, like you've got one who's looking at a more pragmatic approach to it, the other one's got more of a radical extremist look.
He sure does.
That's why I think Elliot's a cyber terrorist, because really his acts of destroying a bank economy is basically terrorism.
Right, and he is, and that those are all questions that are answered through wardrobe and makeup. But weren't you the one that just asked me what the significance of a Dutch angle was?
Yes, and this is Dutch angle, I'm guessing.
Where's the horizon in this shot?
It's behind them, and it's going in a way, and it's going in a slanted direction.
It's what we call running downhill frame left.
It's running downhill frame
running
left.
Downhill frame left, right? The world doesn't work that way, right? The horizon's even.
Yeah.
In a world where there's no problems and no conflicts, the horizon is straight across the middle, smooth sailing. In a world that's messed up and things are starting to go wrong, the horizon starts running downhill one way or the other. In this case, it's running downhill to the left. And by running downhill to the left, we get some very interesting diagonal linear composition, don't we? You see a lot of repetitive pattern in horizontal leading lines.
Yeah, so technically this is though not a true Dutch shot, they've indirectly created a Dutch angle.
It's slightly Dutched. Yeah, it is. It's a forced perspective where the leading lines are running through the frame, running downhill to the left, and the world is sliding downhill to the hell in a handbasket, which is just out of lower frame left, right? Things are going to hell in a handbasket. It's running downhill. There's a lot of parallel lines here. All right, what about this one? So in this scene, Darlene says, it can't be just you and me, Elliot. We're going to need a team. We need help. So she recruits other ideologues to join them in their mission. And they're seated at a table having a meeting. And that's all I'm going to tell you about this until you tell me what you see compositionally in this frame. What do you see?
I see a bunch of lines converging to a focal point.
Where?
To Darlene.
Yeah, we see
behind Darlene too.
Yeah, it's a tin ceiling. It's a tin roof, right? It's embossed ceiling tiles that are, this is an old thing they used to do turn of the last century, as a way of, sort of interior decoration. And the lines in the tiles are all creating these interesting vertical leading lines that are running down towards where's the horizon?
Where the bar is, I'm guessing.
Yeah, if you follow the line of the countertop, you can kind of see that it dissects frame right pretty much in the middle of the frame. And it goes straight across through this girl's head, through Darlene's head, and all the way across. And it's supported, but not exactly by the lower line of this picture frame on the wall. It goes straight through the shot, just like that. And what do you see as a result of where the horizon is? What's happening?
It's kind of, if the lines are going in this direction, I think it's starting to surround them to a degree. If you think
Who's in charge? Who's in charge?
Darlene is in charge.
Is she?
Oh, it puts them on an even playing field.
They're all equal in rank, but Darlene is in the middle, which could indicate that she has some superiority there. And she's Elliot's sister, so it's the nepotism thing, right?
So
she is technically in charge, but the leader of the group's not present yet at the table.
Yeah, and Elliot.
That would be Elliot, right? So in the absence of Elliot, these three have equal power within the group because they each have a skill they're bringing to the table. She's the organizationalist, he's the anarchist, and she's the physicist, right? The mathematician. And they each have something they're bringing to the problem of achieving, financial anarchy, right? And Elliot is not present in this particular scene, okay? So in the absence of Elliot, we can look at all the indicators that are trying to tell us, listen to what Darlene has to say. She's meeting these new members of the group. They're all going to have something equal to bring to the table, but she is in the middle. She is the centered object. She is conflicted, not well balanced. She's half lit, okay, technically, even though her fill level is very open. She is half lit. She's still in her own mind questioning whether or not she's doing the right thing by helping her brother instead of having him committed, right? And she brings in some help that can help her accomplish Elliot's plan. That's what's going on in this shot. What about this shot? What do you see?
I see Bokeh for one, and the focus is put on another character, but there's another character speaking to him in the background. So it's probably indicating that while he's the guy in charge, he's probably just a puppet and a string to the guy in the back.
Who's the guy in charge?
The one closer to the screen.
Elliot.
Yeah, Elliot. But the guy who's really because he's close to the screen, he's in focus. But the guy in the back seems is a little out of focus, but he's the one that's speaking to him. So
right.
So the real person in charge is the guy in the background, but it wants you to think that Elliot is still in charge.
That's very interesting for a guy who hasn't seen the show.
I haven't seen the show, but I'm just very good at analyzing.
You probably got Google and you got the plot on your screen.
I know, actually, it's just I've just seen several shows. Like
You're right. You are right, my friend. You are right. Elliot is in focus. This is Christian Slater, and he plays the character of Mr. Robot. Now, have you seen Fight Club?
No,
Alyssa
but I've
just
heard
gave
of it.
me a look that like a bell just went off, didn't it?
It
No.
did. It did.
Why? Because I asked you about Fight Club?
No, because you said Christian Slater was Mr. Robot, and every time I've seen a poster or anything promotional for the show, I've just always assumed it was Rami Malek.
Rami is Elliot.
Right.
Christian Slater is Mr. Robot. But now here's the bomb I'm going to drop on you. This is Elliot's alter ego. He's schizophrenic. This is Elliot's bad side. And this is Elliot's quote unquote good side. Elliot exists in reality. Christian Slater is all in his head. Elliot is in focus. Christian Slater is out of focus. Depth of field is the only way to imply this visually without telling you what's going on. And you guessed it, Andrew. He is in charge mentally. He is struggling to maintain control over his alter ego, which is the one that's telling him to blow up the world and burn it all down, right? Take revenge. And Elliot's going, I know I'm crazy and I know I should take medication and I'm trying very hard to keep this all bottled up inside. And the world is very fuzzy on the outside because there's moral ambiguity and there's wrong and there's pain and suffering. And Elliot thinks he can fix it by destroying the world financial network, the banking network. And this guy is saying, yeah, do it, blow it all up.
This reminds me of a show I watched a while back. Like there's a character in the show called Decius, and he has like 5 minds in one body.
Yeah.
And eventually what happens is that Decius, one of his 5 minds, basically kills the other 4 in order to reach something called consensus.
Elliot's going to do some of the same stuff in different ways.
I have a feeling because the way he does it is just basically they're all 5 faces, and he just basically torches the other ones off.
As far as I can tell, as far as I've gotten in the series, and I've gotten through halfway through season 3, is that Elliot has at least 2 alter egos. The primary one, the one responsible for all of Elliot's bad behavior, is Christian Slater, Mr. Robot. Okay. And so, yes, so this is visually, this is how we're going to manipulate composition. He's big in the frame, right? All we see is, this is called a big close-up. Okay. We don't want to see anything else in the frame because in this moment, Ishmael wants the audience to be looking at the inner conflict of this character, Elliot. Everything you need to know about Elliot's conflict is right here in the frame. And it's all telling you something. You see how the bokeh even leads from Christian Slater to Elliot, almost like an umbilical? Like this guy is dependent on this guy for his life, because that's really kind of true.
Yep.
Right? If Elliot takes his meds, this guy recedes into the background in the recesses of his unstable mind. And when Elliot's off his meds, Mr. Robot comes out to wreak havoc. Okay. And so the bokeh, even the bokeh in the background, has some kind of symbology attached to it at this point. It's out of focus, so we don't really know what it is, except it's lights, right? It could be the light of truth in the background too. Mr. Robot is looking at Elliot. It's almost like defining his look line. And then Elliot's sharp and Christian Slater is soft. So yeah.
What it looks like to me is actually a little different. It looks like a little wire cable, like his own, and they're going into the back of their heads.
Sharing energy, sharing
mental conversation.
Sure. Absolutely. Why not?
Yeah.
It's all you can reason all of those interpretations through the image when you know what the story is and if you've been watching it, if you've been following it. So here's an interesting shot. I'm going to have to tell you a few things. So Christian Slater is in the story Elliot's true father who died. When it's a memory of Elliot's real father, Christian Slater is in focus and he doesn't wear the hat or the jacket, which says Mr. Robot on it, by the way. He appears as dad in his memory. So if Elliot was having a memory of his father, what could you reason from the elements in this frame is Slater's emotional state? In this scene, Elliot is remembering his father, as a loving father, but as a father who was not available to Elliot when Elliot needed him. The father in his memory is making an emotional appeal to Elliot saying, I love you. Why are you doing this? Right. And withdrawing, in other words, and becoming, crazy. In this scene, it's the father's emotional appeal to Elliot, and the red is symbolizing his love for his son that he was never able to show in real life effectively, so that Elliot knew and was aware of how he was loved and how his family felt about him. It's part of the interpersonal disconnect that we see in real life all the time, right? The parent who can't express love, and therefore the child grows up feeling unloved. And when an unloved child grows up to adulthood, they tend to be a rebel or a disruptor because they're constantly looking for affirmation that they never got as a child, right? It's all of those things kind of wrapped into this image. It's a reflection, it's a memory. Okay. How about this one?
There's symmetry right down
Yes,
the
there
middle.
is. So what else?
Both characters are more or less at the same level in the frame, and they're looking directly at each other. And
Like
since there's like a line straight down the frame, it's almost like it's saying these are two different sides competing with each other, almost.
what thing in nature, and nature meaning the real world, gives us a sense of that? This image is from the first season, and I'm pretty sure it's from the first episode.
The lines are going straight into the going.
First or second episode. The lines are going where?
They're going straight back.
They are?
Yeah.
Straight back?
As in the horizon, as in going to the horizon.
Where's the horizon?
The doors, the back of the frame.
The bottom of the window frames in the doors, right? And so you see all those diagonal lines kind of leading in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But there's something about this image that resonates of something else that you know and you probably do or use every day.
A mirror.
A mirror, right? It's a mirror. It's a symmetrical image with the exception of the characters themselves. The rail car, the subway car, is a mirror image of itself. Running right through the center of the frame is this out of focus detail, which appears to divide the frame perfectly in half. And we got angular lines over here and angular lines over here. And the basic layout is the same on both sides, right? Except we got Elliot on this side and Mr. Robot on this side, and they are
staring at each other through what looks like a mirror world,
looking at each other as though in a mirrored reflection, right? Could you say then that Elliot is looking at himself and his evil alter ego is looking back at him in the mirror?
Yeah.
He's seeing his alter ego for the first time.
His other self.
His other self. He's looking at himself and wondering, oh man, what's up? What's going on?
I wonder if this is what Kevin sees in his head every single time from Split.
Kevin.
The main villain from Split, James McAvoy.
Oh, I don't know.
Because he has 23 different people in his 23 different personalities, and they're like all in a little room where each has a chair of their own. I just think that Kevin has
he has multiple personality disorder. Yeah.
Yeah, they call it.
I imagine
they call it DID.
Mirror. Yeah. He sees in the mirror whoever the prevailing personality is in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah. In this moment, he's only aware of Mr. Robot as his alter ego. So he's only apparently, the implication is I must be seeing myself. He's the only person I think is in my head. He doesn't know there's more at this point.
That's even further emphasized by look at his skin color. Look at his skin tone. It looks almost green.
He looks kind of dead, doesn't he? With the dark sweatshirt and He is in reality, but he's leading a Walking Dead lifestyle. He is the illusion, but he's casually dressed and looks normal. And he's not normal. He's an anarchist, and he is normal for lack of his personality disorder and his medicated state. So everything is a dichotomy, and everything is opposite of what it looks like. Everything is in opposition to the other. How about this? So Elliot is at home, safe, medicated for the moment. Mr. Robot hasn't shown himself. The outside world is around the corner outside the bathroom, and it is expressed in this cool blue tone that is raking down the wall. In the bathroom, he's in his warm, comfortable womb where he can take his medications and everything, but he's disturbed at his own image in the mirror. He's afraid he's going to see Christian Slater, so he punches the mirror to shatter the image that he sees reflected back at him, and he chooses to simply be medicated and be warm and comfortable and numb, as opposed to going out into the cold, hard world in the blue light and sorting out his problems. Does that make sense? Let's skip this one. How about this one? Does anybody know what this angle is called?
A bird's eye angle?
Yeah, we might call it a bird's eye view. Yeah, we might call it an omnipotent point of view. We are the audience after all, and this is how we see Elliot in almost every episode. In at least one frame, in one scene, we see Elliot in his world from an all-knowing point of view, right? In this particular shot, we see Elliot in bed from a high point of view, and he's medicated, and he is in his bedroom at his mom's house. He's trying to stay medicated so he won't go nuts and wreak havoc in the outside world. He's also hiding from elements of the outside world that are tempting him to misbehave. And he thinks he's better off staying in bed, medicated, and not going outside. And he's got all the windows drawn, and he's hiding under the covers like a kid afraid of monsters under his bed, right? How about this picture? You see anything going on here that might suggest something? We've been in this rail car at least once before, twice before. And each time we saw certain things. This time there is one element that is strikingly different. So let me tell you what's happening. This is second season, I believe, and I think it's towards the end of the second season, where the sister, through all the weird hijinks and things that are going on, is thinking that it'd be best if she just cut off ties with Elliot and got away from him. She has loyalty to her brother. She knows her brother is vulnerable and needs somebody's help. She's not sure she's strong enough to provide that help. And she has self-medicated in the process of trying to make this decision. Knowing what you know now, do you see things in this frame that might support that emotion and that you might do to help the audience reach that same conclusion?
There are like all kinds of lines from items in the train car going different directions and kind of wrapping around.
Are they going different directions?
Well, not different directions, but like there's like a circular railing at the top, in the top left. And that line in the railing in the center kind of splits her from the rest of reality if she's self-medicating.
It's interesting to define reality. What if all of these lines are not radiating but converging to a focal point? Where are they leading? Where are they taking us?
To Darlene.
To Darlene. Specifically,
Her face.
to her head, right? This is a mental problem. The leading lines are all leading to Darlene, who's inside her own head, right? She's self-medicated. She has on her rose-colored glasses. She's trying to see the world in a positive light, despite of all the havoc she's helped Elliot create. And then there's one element that really indicates that she's not in her right mind. What is it, do you think? We've seen this car before, and with the exception of lines running downhill or running parallel, this is the first time we've ever seen a line that's bent. A line that's bent might indicate that she is a little high, a little drunk, a little whatever, right? She's not on the straight up and up. She's bent. She's bent out of shape. She's upset, she's angry, and she's self-medicated. And so I think that this vertical line is trying to suggest to us that she's not normal. She's all in her head and she's self-medicated, so she's probably not feeling right or thinking right. This is an extreme wide angle close-up. When you take a real wide angle lens and you get really close to your subject, vertical lines like this will bend aggressively. And the closer you get and the wider the lenses, the more aggressive these curves are. It's called barrel distortion. It's the result of having a lens that has an extremely wide field of view that's only meant to look at things from a distance, so that vertical lines have a chance at great distance to appear straight up and down. But at close range, any vertical lines in the foreground are going to bend radically like that. Okay. So they're using a physical property of an extreme wide angle lens as a metaphorical compositional element. Do you see how that works? They know that the 8mm lens, let's say, is not going to be what we call rectilinear. Lines are not going to be straight, either up and down or horizontally, on a lens that extremely wide. So if the lines are bent and they're not straight, that might be a metaphor for somebody who's not in their right mind. And then if all the other leading lines are leading to her head, we know that she's not in her right mind and she is totally in her head right now. She's trying to make a decision. How about this guy? Tell me what you see happening here. Where is he?
He's centered in frame.
He's centered in the frame. Who gets to be center in the frame?
People who are either balanced or being pulled in two different directions.
Which guy is this?
The one
Being
that's
pulled in two different directions.
He's not the emotionally balanced one, is he? We know that already. But he is in the center of the frame. Is he conflicted?
Actually, I don't think he's conflicted.
He's not conflicted in this moment. You're right, Andrew. He's given up.
I wouldn't say giving up either.
This is an unbalanced force. I can tell you, having seen the episode, that he has said, you know what? When I'm medicated, I don't wreak havoc, but I can't live my life in my bedroom with the shades drawn and my covers over my head, and I can't go outside. I might be better off dead. And so then a character arrives that says, is that what you really want? Or do you just want to do what I'm asking you to do? So he's being imposed upon by this outside force. He's in the middle because he has chosen not to make a decision about how to conduct his life, but rather to end it instead.
I'm thinking it's Mr. Robot that's in the background.
Nope, it's not. It's a different character. It's a person of color. See here? It's not Christian Slater. It's another of what I suspect strongly is another one of Elliot's alter egos. A lesser one, though. This alter ego is merely the guy that convinced him to become a computer hacker. Mr. Robot is the personality that convinced him to take down the world. Two different alter egos representing two different kinds of pressure. Both are up to no good, but this guy is the one that got him going in the direction that he's moving in. How about this one? This is Elliot's psychiatrist. So, who's in control?
Mr. Robot, obviously.
Mr. Robot is taking the upper hand. Something interesting about these two characters that I haven't really talked about much is the fact that they're both silhouettes. A silhouetted character might mean a character who's lying, a character who is up to no good, a bad character, a character that's hiding something, a character that we don't know that much about. But we know who Mr. Robot is already, more we think we know, because we've seen him now for an entire season and a half. And we know who the psychiatrist is. She's been working with Elliot from about mid first season to where we are now, which is roughly mid second season, I think.
But how can she see Mr. Robot?
She doesn't see Mr. Robot.
Then why is she so shocked? It looks like she's like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing another personality.
No, she's surprised because he suddenly got into her face.
Yes. Thank you, Trinity. She's Elliot's psychiatrist. Up until this point, Elliot's been seeing her on a weekly basis, talking about how he's schizophrenic and uncomfortable and nervous and medicated, but she's never seen him aggressive before because he's always come in under control, under medication, but he hasn't been taking his meds. Mr. Robot is asserting control, and Mr. Robot goes to talk to the psychiatrist, and Mr. Robot tries to gain the upper hand in this relationship. And she's seeing the aggressive side of Elliot for the very first time. And she now believes that Elliot has a dangerous, violent side that she didn't want to believe before.
So technically she is seeing Mr. Robot, though not physically.
Yes, right. She's seeing, yeah, Mr. Robot, but for Elliot's exterior, right?
This reminds now I'm starting to get another call back to like this time it's just from a video game. Like there's a scene where with the main character Alex Mason, he comes into contact with Friedrich Steiner, one of the people that that Reznov wanted him to kill, and he sees Reznov kill him, but other CIA agents Hudson and Weaver see Mason kill Steiner instead. And in the interrogation room, Mason's basically saying, no, Reznov killed Steiner. That wasn't me. But then he has like this big revelation where he finds out that it was him, and that Reznov has been dead for 5 years, and that every time he's seen Reznov, it's just been a hallucination.
Okay. It sounds like you're seeing what is trying to be done here, and you're applying your own experience to the metaphor. It sounds like you get it. In other words, both of these characters are not being truthful. She had details that she hid from Elliot. Mr. Robot, Elliot found out and got really mad. He's confronting the psychiatrist. He's in a higher position of assertion here, but they're both silhouettes because she was hiding something. He was hidden to her view, so he's also a silhouette. And the room is otherwise normally lit, more or less. I mean, it's dimly lit, but it's lit, and they are in silhouette. So again, this is the director trying to tell us this situation warrants your extra attention. Think about what you're seeing here. What do the metaphors of silhouettes mean? And that will lead you to the state of mind of both of these characters.
And I'm also seeing this as like a third person perspective, that Elliot himself is looking at it from this direction.
That's something I hadn't thought of. That's very possible. We are supposed to be in this series, we are supposed to be the omnipotent audience. at either the beginning or the end of every episode, Elliot, the character, turns to the camera a lot like Kevin Spacey does in House of Cards. And he tells us what he's thinking about, what he's going to do, or what he's going to try to accomplish in that immediate scenario. And so we get to see inside the mind of Elliot as the omnipotent audience. We get that like once per episode. So this angle could be Elliot, the disembodied Elliot, looking at the whole scenario, or it could be we, the omnipotent audience, looking at the biggest picture now of Elliot misbehaving as Mr. Robot, and someone in reality recognizing Mr. Robot as Mr. Robot for the first time.
It just reminds me of like I've seen this in multiple psychological films where you have like the main character seeing things from their perspective that in reality are themselves in that moment doing those things.
Yeah.
Precisely. It's like a common psychological film trope.
So you could take this at face value and say, oh yeah, it's just artfully silhouetted because her room is dimly lit in the first place and they're sitting across the room from any possible window or lamp, and they would be dark in that corner of the room. Yeah, okay, there's that. But all of this is symbolic and metaphorically appealing to the audience in deeper layers to this onion. So there's something for everyone in the audience. The ones that want the low-hanging fruit just see an interestingly lit scene with some provocative silhouettes. But those who are looking for the meaning behind all these characters and why they're behaving the way they behave might take notes about the silhouette and the nature of what a silhouette means and draw conclusions about these characters that is not being expressed in the dialogue necessarily, or not to the extent that they can put two and two together as an audience.
Oh, did we skip over two?
Yeah, because I'm running out of time here. I'm actually, taking some liberty here, but I wanted to talk about this final frame with you guys, which is using a lot of compositional elements here to play on the final shot of I think this is the last shot of the second season. Elliot has succeeded with an initial attack on the internet and has damaged the financial network around Wall Street. And there are things happening like on the NASDAQ and stuff that are reflecting his mischief. He's gotten away with some of what he wanted to do here. And in the process, he enters the room from over here, frame right, and the camera is on a steady cam and it follows and leads him around this huge conference table, down one side and up the other side. And as he walks, Elliot is looking at the team that has grown out of him and his sister, and then him and his sister and their two colleagues, to this army of hackers and deviant subcultural characters who are all banding together to fulfill Elliot's grand designs, right? It's a lot like Ed Norton and the second half of Fight Club, where they attack the banks and they crash the credit card system. It's kind of the same idea, right? And Elliot's walking around this huge room. You got the NASDAQ on two huge screens back here showing financial crashes going on all over the marketplace. And then you got Elliot walking around the room looking at all the people that are helping him make this happen. And he is now in a reflective moment, like, holy crap, look at what I've done. Look at what I've assembled. Look at the potential we have to do some real damage. I had no idea it could go this far. And he's really stepping back and taking stock in the moment, so to speak. But we've got some interesting compositional things going on. What's the most obvious one?
The pipes splitting to the screens.
The what now?
Or the ceiling, the lines on the ceiling leading to the screens.
They're leading to the screens, and the screens are telling us the story of Elliot has started to crash the market. So yes, that works. What else?
So he's almost framed like he's outside of what's going on in the scene, because the lines are all leading towards the stock market numbers in the back.
Yeah, not Elliot, right?
Yeah.
Right. He's
Using
off
the
to
rule
one
of
side.
thirds.
He's off to one side. He's almost on the outside looking in, right? Yeah, because that's how he feels in his head right now. He's feeling like, my God, I've put this thing into motion. I've given life to this movement, and I'm not even sure if I'm the right leader. I'm not even sure if I'm crazy or not. I shouldn't be here. I could get away and leave them to it. They seem to be fine without me. He is. He's kind of conflicted right now, and he's on the outside, almost on the outside looking in. Yeah, you're right. What else? What do you see here in terms of other compositional interplay? How about the use of color? What's happening here?
Green for money.
They're watching the stock market. They're watching the stock market crash.
Could be. The green represents the collapse of financial reality over here. That could very well be the meaning of green. Well, then what does blue mean? Does anybody associate the color blue with technology?
Yeah, it's like it's common color in Tron. I mean, look.
If blue represents technology, then could you say that this tableau represents, and kind of look, if you take the warm tone of his skin and very loosely associate it with the warm tones of the spectrum, those would be what colors?
Orange.
Orange and red, right?
I wouldn't say
Red.
orange and red, more like orange and yellow.
If the two extremes are red and blue, okay, then orange would be lumped in with the red spectrum and blue is on the other end, the opposite side, right? And then green is sort of in the middle, and red, blue, and green is what?
Those are the primary colors we use in film.
Those are the additive primary colors for film and film lighting.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
RGB,
Yep, RGB.
triangle, RGB, and then green representing money or what else?
Envy.
Envy, maybe, or
Evil.
Foreboding.
how about greed? How about greed? Money and greed is here. Technology is over here. Technology arguably makes this possible, but in the ironic situation where you add this element, this becomes the clash: technology versus finance and greed, money versus technology. One begat the other, but one is going to be used in this case by this person as an interpretation of quote unquote his good, his idea he thinks is good, crashing the market. So this defines the conflict: money versus virtue or ideology, where technology is used as the lever. Does that make sense? Trinity, would you agree? Or at least can you see where my reasoning is coming from? Could you interpret that in any other way, knowing what you know about the series?
It's been a hot minute since I've seen it, but
A couple of years
no,
ago.
that's basically the same vibes I got when I watched it.
I haven't seen the series, but I'm thinking like that there could be another explanation for this. Because like you said,
Why don't you watch the series and then come back and tell us what that explanation could be? Because I can tell you right now, this is a landmark piece of work. It's an exceptional example of creative exertion of knowledge and experience. It was written well, it was performed well, and it was shot exquisitely. And it's worth seeing on all three of those levels as a film student. And if you're not subjecting yourself to enough stimulus you're not watching enough movies. Okay. It is now your business to know what all this means, right? If you want to get out there and work in an industry where people are contriving these images and encoding messages and values and ethics and history and knowledge into visuals that you're going to consume as an audience, and you want to be in the film industry and you want to be a part of that, then that means you have to speak this language. You must be literate in the elements of composition and framing and filmmaking and lighting and in color and in emotions that can be elicited from all of those tools, right? You got to know what all this means. And if you don't hit the nail on the head, according to traditional interpretations, then you should have a very good and reasoned and informed explanation that represents how you see it. And that is your style. And that's what makes you a distinctive filmmaker versus everybody else. None of your images should be taken for granted. It's just like Chekhov said in writing. In my other class, we talked about Chekhov's gun, which is a principle that says no element of a story should be shown to an audience that doesn't have a significant role to play. You should never show the audience something that is insignificant. Every element of your story should represent a theme, a tone, should directly represent, either directly or metaphorically, a character or a character's belief system or something. Nothing should be random. If it's random, you're not doing your job as the creator, because as the creator of your films, of your scripts, of your cinematography, you're talking to an audience with everything you do. Are you speaking gibberish, or are you communicating clearly and they simply need to learn how to interpret your work in order to receive your message? Somebody who walks into a scene and merely shoots what's in front of their camera without trying to imbue any message or theme or support any tone or aspect of the script is essentially, in film language, speaking gibberish. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
And if you want to be articulate, if you want to express, can communicate, and have a point of view that can be received by your audience, then these are the things that you must learn to understand, interpret, and then master and put into your own work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at here. I've taken you all the way around the block to make that really salient point, but it's important that you understand your role, right? Even if you're not going to be the cinematographer, if you're going to direct, how are you going to impart this information to your cinematographer if you don't understand it yourself as a director? How are you going to interpret a script as an actor if you don't understand the lines that you read, both literally and metaphorically?
That's pretty, I can see that actually resonates well with me, because I've done that. And believe me, when it comes to acting, whether it be on stage or on film, script, the way a script is written is different. Like I remember doing with my film production, I had to make a script. I had to basically highlight it and color code it and basically send it off and get it redone.
So it's far reaching into every discipline associated with film and manufacturing of stories.
Yeah, and you pretty much
reaches into all corners, right?
Yeah.
So if you're an editor, you got to know this, because you need to know what shots, what scenes play well. I call it laying down nicely next to each other on your editing, on your nonlinear editing line in your timeline, right? You got to know what shots play well with others. How do the shots fit together so that you get a sense of the flow of the story, and what shots represent really good metaphorical as well as literal interpretation, and use those because they have more dimension and more facets for a bigger audience to latch onto. Images that are very literal and lack a lot of depth and maybe are framed well enough to where you can chop them together and kind of get a story to come out, that's minimal. That's minimalist. That's minimal effort, right? And nobody's ever going to reward you for that kind of minimal effort. Okay, the effort's going to come when you combine all of these resources with all of this information, and you appeal to as many audiences as you can on many different levels, so that it creates discourse. people talk about your work and they debate back and forth what it means, and then they have fun with interpretation, and they have fun with consuming subsequent episodes of your story. And that's how you get a hit show, right? You create a show that doesn't insult anybody's intelligence, and asks everybody to raise the level of their game as the audience, right? Don't
Yeah.
just lay around and lazily watch my show with a bag of chips like you got nothing better to do. You should want to be on the sofa at 8 o'clock on Thursday night to watch this deal and learn what I have to tell you, and then go out and talk to your friends about it and debate about it and meme about it and create a culture around this. It's called rhetorical velocity. I give you a message through one means of rhetorical action. You latch onto it, and then you reinterpret it, and you offer it to your audience or your friends, and everybody mixes it up, and it becomes this thing that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's when you become part of a filmmaking culture where you can say you're a prime mover. You're creating things that are stirring people and encouraging discussion and debate. And then you become the kind of filmmaker that becomes heralded for their achievements,
It's
right?
kind of like what happened with machinima back in the early 2000s.
You draw whatever conclusion is important to you, as long as you're receiving this message, which is you got to work hard for your images and make sure that you put in as much as you can to do justice to your audience and not treat your audience like a bunch of dummies, right? Because they need more than sugar and water to survive. They need nutrients, they need nutrition. And this is nutrition, composition, and metaphor and subtext and performance, good dialogue. All of these things are the nutritious things that we need to feed our creative soul, if you will, right? So think about it in those terms. Don't go into any of this half-cocked, because everybody who wants to be successful in the film industry, and those who are successful in the industry, treat all these things very seriously. And so if you want to play the game on that level, then you got to raise the level of your play. Okay? That's my message. So, does anyone have any questions about any of that I've shown you? Anything? Any thoughts? Any questions regarding any of this? It's a lot to think about, I know. That's why I did it this week, because you got next week off and you can kind of let some of this stuff marinate a little bit.
There's a lot more to composition than I'd ever thought before, especially with just the position of subjects in a frame and what that can mean to their character and their mental state. I never really thought that far into it before.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better myself, Marcus. That's you've made it. You've done it. That's the wisdom. That's the nugget. So take that with you, and now think about these things and pick the things you want to adopt and make your own, right? This is why I like working for a lot of different people. Don't enter the industry and call yourself a director. Everybody looks to the director for the answers, right? Until you have the answers, until you have synthesized a variety of answers to come up with one answer that reflects how you feel, why would you want to come out and represent yourself as the director? Go work for other directors who have gotten to the point where they think they know what's going on, and see what they've figured out, and cherry pick what you like from their approach, and then move on to somebody else and work for a variety of people before you try to ascend to that same mantle, so that when you finally achieve director for yourself, you will have a body of experience working for other directors, and you will have consumed their best parts, discarded the stuff you didn't agree with, and reformulated all of that feedback into your style and your way of thinking, right? And then you become the next step in the evolution of a director, right? And so I love working for different people as long as I can to keep getting as many different points of view as I can, so that when I assimilate all that information and I come out the other side, I can tell you precisely what I mean, precisely what I want you to see, and I know exactly how to get there from A to B, because I have so many valuable mentors that stack up behind me whose shoulders I stand on, right? This is the process. This is the creator's way, right? This is how you do it. And it starts here, doing the work right here, and you've nailed it right on the head. If you didn't know it before, but you see it now, hallelujah, brother. Now let's see what you can do with this new knowledge that you possess. And on that note, which sounded pretty good, I think I'm going to quit this conversation because I don't think I can do any better than that right now.
I was pretty much going to build on it anyways.
Not what more can you say, right? Except I
Except
hope
that
you enjoy the spring break. Spend your time safely, please. Social distance and wear a mask, but have fun and enjoy yourself. Get some rest if possible. Reflect if possible. Come back. You'll have 1 week of reconciliation of this whole semester, and then we'll get you a final quiz, and we'll get you out of here and onto your summer break. Okay. If you have any questions for me in the meantime, feel free to email me. If you have any questions that I haven't addressed or haven't answered to your satisfaction here tonight, certainly email me for that. We can always have an independent Zoom if you need more time. But I think I've kind of flogged this horse into submission for the evening. And I think right now what would be best would be if you let all these themes marinate and think about them and give yourself a little bit of a break for the next few days, okay? Unless you haven't finished any of your assignments, then please get those into me so I can grade them, okay? All right, folks, do I have a motion for adjourning this meeting that went over time? And I'm very, very sorry for that, but some very good conversation nevertheless. I have one motion I have a second motion to adjourn. So thank you very much, folks. Have a good evening. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for your engagement. Stimulating conversation as always, and I'll see you guys week after next.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for putting up with me all this semester.
No worries. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.